And let's get that wide shot. All right, we're live. Here we are. Me, Michael Masterson, a.k.a. Mark Ford. We're running a little late. We set this one up. It's the first time we've ever done this live. We usually do this over Zoom, but we're both in Delray. You have this awesome space, and I think it would be awesome to have sat in front of Mark Ford and just... So, like, what's crazy is I knew as soon as the cameras turned on, everything would shift. Like, we were just talking about Stand By Me and all sorts of stuff. And I knew as soon as the cameras come on, I would go into, like, this weird sort of interview. And I don't want to do that. I want to have the conversation we were just having.
I'll respond to the question you asked me right before we went live, which was, did I party a lot in my 20s? And the answer is, in my 20s, I was a bartender. And, I was going to college, but I was also a bartender, so I didn't, I kind of got my partying done while I worked, which was awesome. And the days there are two things. The days that I wasn't bartending, I was bartending probably 4 or 5 times a week. And back then in New York, you were bartending till 4 in the morning. And then you would go out and have breakfast. So I didn't have, I was no time to party during the working week. And then if I had a day off or two, I didn't want to. I was full up with, when you're a young man, you want to be around having conversations with young women, and I got plenty of that. And when you're a bartender, working in a young person's bar, you have an extra advantage because if you're just polite and you serve the ladies that come in, they actually want to be with you because they feel you're a form of kind of protection. I'm here because I know these guys, the bartenders. And so it's actually much easier. There was a time when I actually thought I was very good with women until I occasionally would go out to a regular bar and discover that they weren't as interested in me as I thought they would be.
Right. It's like a status. I'm gonna bring this mic over here so I can lean back.
It's
like a status thing because like you were the dude at that bar.
There's status, but I think it's really, from talking to them, it's comfort because I don't know how it is now, but back then, if a woman was in a bar, the guys were like trying to, pick up on her. And
back then, they don't do that today.
No, I'm just saying. Okay, I'm pretending I don't know what goes on today. Sure. But So I definitely got this feeling that they just felt like relaxed. There was they were coming to the bar not to meet guys, The guys were basically looking for a one-night event. The way we all thought back then, the women were looking to meet their husband, and so it was uncomfortable for them. But if they became good friends with the bartenders, and the bartenders were never hitting on them and were just, just good guys that were serving them, and that's what it was like. So it was, it filled up whatever emotional needs I had.
The validation.
Yeah, the partying. Yeah.
Oh, the partying.
Yeah, why do you want to party? It's for the same reason you want validation. You want to know that other people are interested in you.
That's huge because I started dating again like this summer, and I was going out to these bars, and we're in South Florida. It is a different culture. I remember moving here from North Carolina, and it was culture shock. It's so much more in your face, and people are very upfront about what it is.
Right.
And I had this string of weekends where I would go out, and this is something I've had to develop over time. It's sort of like when you write copy, you have to understand your target market. And the first time you write copy, you're like, maybe not you, maybe you fell right into it. But most people are like, this feels sleazy, it feels salesy, it feels, I wouldn't say this. It's like, no, but that is the field that you're playing in. That's the arena you're operating in. And so I had this string of weekends before I finally had like a little epiphany, where I would go out and I would talk to people, and I'd talk to them almost like we're talking. And when I say people, I mean women.
Right.
And I wouldn't get anywhere. I could see, and this would destroy me every time. I could see their initial impression of me, their eyes light up. because I knew I wanted to talk to them, and I'm
Right.
stupid. Like, I'm like, the way that I bumble in, the way I'm sitting here in front of you now, is just because
Right.
I was like, hey, do you want to be on my
Right, right,
podcast?
right,
Like, I
right.
just do it, right?
Right.
So I walk, hey, you're the classiest looking girl here.
Right.
And they're like, oh my goodness. And then we start talking, and I can see the light dim in front of my face until I'm like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah, what were you doing wrong?
And it was, I would go home, and I would be like, I must be, like you talk about the validation.
Right.
I thought, I must be the most uninteresting human alive because I keep seeing it. There's a girl who's legitimately like, I want this dude to seduce me. I want this dude to sweep me off my feet when I meet them because I'm so, like I say, I'm so naive and stupid about it. I just roll up and I start just like, hey, what's up?
Right,
Like,
right.
and then eventually like, oh, this guy just doesn't get it. And what I started to recognize was two things. The first being that the people that that I see at the bar every weekend, those aren't the same people as me. We probably won't ever have the same conversations. And the second thing I started to recognize was like, I first blamed myself and said, I must not be interesting. But then over time, I started to say, well, that's not necessarily true. I just don't know how to speak in this environment
Right.
and this language and this. I don't know how to have small talk. I can't meet someone cold at a bar
Right.
who's used to this environment,
Right.
used to the courting ritual that occurs here, and be like, what are your hopes and dreams, dear? Like, I
Right.
can't open with that.
Right.
And I've had that struggle of, like, I have to learn how to be more in the moment and more of, like, it's almost like, I feel like it ties so deeply with copy, like understanding not the words on the page, but the little emotional dance behind the buttons that we're
Yeah,
pressing.
yeah.
That happens in real life.
So, do you think the way you would initiate conversations in? Did you say North Carolina?
Well, in North Carolina, I've always been a relationship guy. I always had a
Right.
relationship. I was single for a small stint.
Right.
I've been single in Florida more than North Carolina,
Right.
really.
But was that working in North Carolina? And in other words, was the language, the conversation different when you were down here? Is that what part of the problem? Is that why your eyes were fogging over?
I think in North Carolina, I had a bit more of a social thing. Something I've seen is like the sort of duration of these engagements, if you will, usually depends on how much of like a social circle you come from. Like if a friend introduces me, there's a lot longer tail to that. But if it's like someone like where I just walked up and said
Right.
hello and sparks fly,
Right.
like it's just as fast as it came, it's
Right.
just as fast as it goes.
Well, in Florida, it could have been that you weren't wearing the right shoes.
Mm.
You know, we have a very, how should I put it? Yeah, I don't know if this is true, but I've certainly been told this by all my younger jiu-jitsu friends that are, it's very much, you know, the women are out there. The women are, it's not like when I was in my 20s. My impression is that women are not coming to bars necessarily to get married. They may be coming to bars for the same reason that that men used to come, or something in between. So a friend of mine told me that it was all about your watch and your shoes, and I thought that was very funny. So he said, you know, if you're in South Florida, the women know how much every pair of shoes costs, every brand, and so who knows?
That's interesting. I feel like there's definitely something to that to a degree. It depends, I guess, on the environment too. Like I feel like at the cigar bars, I feel like they're looking for a demographic.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they come in, they're not looking for young dude,
Right.
like just sort of like sitting there
Yeah.
wearing regular clothes.
Right,
They're
right.
looking for a certain buttoned up sort
Right.
of gentleman.
Right.
Well, what I try to do is I try to be a pattern interrupt in small ways.
Mhm.
And I don't like to be, some people would consider it over the top, so I usually wear like a flower shirt.
Mm-hmm.
I usually let the chest hair show and
Mhm.
hang out. And it's sort of, I feel like the game plan is to make them just like a pattern interrupt. Well, people do pattern interrupts wrong all the time.
Mhm.
But what you want them to do is sort of lean in and say something along like, who does this dude think he is dressing
yeah.
like that or
Yeah,
walking like
right.
that or talking like that?
Right.
But not in an offensive way.
Right.
You don't want to outrage. You sort of want to just prod them to kind of
Right.
wonder that thing.
Yeah.
And then you have scrutiny. And
Yeah.
scrutiny's purest form of attention. That's what you want, scrutiny.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've already proven to me you're way beyond me in terms of this, this kind of communication. But one thing I did observe in my 20s was that confidence had an enormous effect on that. Let's say your ability to engage in conversations and so on. And I was always pretty unconfident,
Mm-hmm.
and I would try to be. My whole thing was always trying to be interesting, which is a terrible way. I don't think that ever worked out. Eventually, it worked out for me fine, but but I did notice there were a few times something must have happened. I must have had the right amount of blood alcohol, where it seemed like, I could just pick out whatever women I wanted, and that would be that. And actually, there's a guy that is in our business. He's an attorney, and to me, he's like the most nerdiest guy you believe. And when I was first with Agora, we used to go out. He was single at the time, and he would just go up to, he had no fear, and would just, and his lines were so lame. They were so it embarrassed me to be. I always wanted to just run away when I saw him. But we're kind of talking about copy, and there's something that's connected with that, which is also related to what you were bringing up before, which is there is a language that works, and he obviously had developed a language that works. Mm. I'm not sure if it was authentic language for him, mm-hmm. but I do think that it's more important if you want to be a very good persuader, whatever. You need to find your own authentic language. I think that's true of whether you're a novelist, you write essays, you're a copywriter. If there's going to be a lot of language in your pitch, it's so much better to find the right voice, a voice that works. Some of the copywriters that I've worked with, mentored, have that voice, and it's just the voice itself feels honest, and you feel like it creates a sense of intimacy, and then the barriers drop. Mm-hmm. But that's not to say that fake voices don't work. Fake voices work very well, and that's the problem for people that are writing. Mm-hmm. They're in whatever type of writing you're doing, whatever type of thing you're doing. If you're a comedian, you could do the tried and proven methods that make people laugh, but they're all canned stuff, and it's not real. You'll never be really a great comedian or a great writer if you do that. And that's why that's one of the things I actually tell young writers who want to be copywriters or other kind of writers, that there's a formula for writing. Mm-hmm. And if you know the formula, you can be successful without actually being very good. Mm-hmm. You just need to become competent at that language, and then it'll work. But of course, we don't, none of us want to be satisfied with that. We want to be more than just competent. So for me, that's about finding enough. I'm certainly not the first person that says this. If you read interviews with even poets, novelists, and so on, they'll say the same thing.
Yeah, I want to go back to something that we were talking about off camera. Before we started, you were talking about, you said Rob Reiner was talking about making Stand By Me, mm-hmm. and you said he was sort of arrogant or a little bit cocky about how he made Stephen King's story his own, right? That was kind of what you were saying?
Yeah, except that's the interesting thing. Mm-hmm. He was saying things that if anybody else said them would seem cocky and arrogant, which would make me not like him. Mm-hmm. But he was saying them in such an innocent way, almost like he was autistic. and so I actually liked him for it. It was like, oh, that's so sweet. He actually doesn't understand that what he's saying right now is kind of arrogant, that he actually improved it. You wouldn't see Scorsese or any of the great, trying to take credit for something they don't need to take credit for because they're so confident in what they do. So the point I was trying to make was this idea about authenticity and letting your audience or correspondent feel like he's intimate with you. I mean, we all have very good friends. Speaking of Stand By Me, that was a story about kids that were each had their own problems and were completely an unlikely group. You know, this kid with the glasses and all the, you know, with the brainiac, and that was certainly true of my friendships. But you were blood brothers because you just connected with each other. You felt so. It's not always a question of whether, you know, like it's people that make, you know, people make friendships based on, and there's even books about how to succeed by making friendships with people with power and connections. To me, that's like.
Well,
yeah.
I heard in one of your interviews you did the How to Win Friends and Influence People course, the Dale Carnegie course.
Right.
And is that one of the books that you're referring to right here? Are you speaking more to power stuff?
That book is actually better. That's the best book of that idea. He's pointing out the facts, the bare facts of how to, you know, get friends and influence people. But there's a lot of that out in the last 10 or 20 years, actually. But it's more, it's, you know, what he said, he just kept his, you know, Carnegie kept his comments to the raw truths about the conversations have to be about the other person. You know, he was the first guy to say that. And people love to hear their name and so on. And so to me, these were so fundamental that I don't think of them as fake. But the stuff that's come out in the last 20 years, a lot of it is so mechanical. Like, it sounds like this stuff we were talking about dating. All those books about how to date. You know, I see them as all kind of phony because they get you some success, but it's a very shallow level of success in terms of personal gratification. I guess what I'm saying is that it's profoundly powerful if you're a communicator of any kind to be able to have your audience or the person you're talking to or whatever like you, like want to like you. If you're a door-to-door salesman, and some people have that naturally and other people, you know, have to figure out how to do it.
So I think one of the common threads that I'm drawing, almost selfishly, because it's sort of like confirmation bias for me, there's this term righteous that keeps coming to mind, righteousness. And not righteousness from like a moral high ground, but righteousness from like an authenticity thing, which is a big thing that I am diving into. And I was talking with Kevin on this on our last podcast, was like, he mentioned, he said, I used to be funny, but then I became a CEO, like a leader. And I was like, same thing happened to me when I had to lead a team. I felt like my personality sort of vanished. And I'm almost doing like this pendulum swing with this whole podcast and talk. It's like I'm trying to be as authentic. So maybe righteous isn't the word, but authentic. And so you said this dude did lines that made you want to run away, your lawyer friend, your geeky lawyer friend.
Right.
And then you mentioned like Rob Reiner. He had like this weird arrogance, but it was like it was like authentic and a bit naive. Right. And then you talk about finding.
He wasn't doing it in an arrogant way.
Yeah.
He was just, if you imagine somebody that's like authentic telling you what a great thing that they did, and it wasn't so great, but they were so happy about it, you
It came from a genuine place.
Yeah.
And I think you said the formula to writing, and there's a formula for writing, and then there's also like finding your voice and making people like you. Right. And I think where this sort of thought process derived for me was this guy, Andrew Tate, blew up on the internet in a period of like a couple months, became the most Googled man on earth. I mean, were you following or aware of any of that?
I wasn't until I just found out about it 2 weeks ago. I was in Nicaragua, and my friend who has a child that was born in Nicaragua, he's now like 14 or something. That's all he talks about, Andrew Tate. And so I looked him up, and I know that there was he was telling it like he sees it. He said some things that people consider to be misogynist.
Yep.
That's all I really know.
So that's basically all you really need to know for the context of what I was about to say, which is that I was like, in the stuff that you see that you're looking up now, he's been like, his old stuff has been wiped from the internet, and he's kind of starting fresh as more like a self-help guy. He was a lot more in your face, outrage, polarizing. And I remember watching this and thinking, like, you know, I see this all the time with like Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort. I see it with like the lady who just scammed a bunch of people is now, she was just covered in a Forbes article. My friend sent me a Forbes thing. She just got out of prison, and now she's like doing interviews, and it's like, why do people like these people?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to equate Andrew Tate with them because I don't think he's like them.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like these patterns of behavior. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, why do people hold certain people in high regard I recognize I had to like eliminate the idea of being nice as a virtue and something that would gain you favor, and realize that instead you need to be authentic. And I think, and I even feel bad for bringing up those people with at the same time as Andrew Tate, because I respect him more than I respect people who swindled people out of money the way they did. But like the way I feel like people resonate and gravitate towards him is sort of the way, like when you were explaining that interview, it's like what he's saying is so like, how dare you almost, but the way he says it, there's this authenticity, this genuineness, this righteousness. And I think, you know, you go back to those dating books, and like we have the canned lines, like say this.
Right.
The lawyer friend with the geeky lines, they worked because those were his lines.
Somehow, yeah. Nobody would have written those lines that was professional. You would never find them. I don't want to say what they were because then he'll know. If he sees this, he'll know I'm talking about him, and I don't want to do that. But yeah, I think you're right. You know, there's one of the things that there's somebody that teaches this, and I've seen it happen to some of the, it happened with American Writers, which is a business I started, copywriting, and this guy was following a theory that if you want to get noticed, just go hard against the biggest fish in the pond, you know, and start criticizing them, and it definitely works. That's a way of getting noticed. But if it's not authentic, if you're doing it just to get noticed, then you're going to run into trouble. You know, it's going to be repetitive, and of course, you know, if it's not true, you can get yourself in trouble and this and that. And so I'm sure we both know at least a dozen people that took that route to get into the information marketing industry. And I know one of them that actually was pretty good, has, now that he's making a lot of money, he's going more to whatever his authentic self is. He's not really there yet, but I see he's moving in that direction. Yeah, you know, there are people that are, I think authenticity is a better word than the others. You think about comedians, like the great comedians were authentic and brave, you know. People that are following scripts, eventually, yeah, they can get, you know, like this is how I think about Jay Leno. He's the best guy at following scripts, you know, and even if he's writing his own scripts, he's just, but compared to Louis C.K. or basically all the great comedians who are now canceled, you know, those guys are telling the truth, you know.
Right.
They're not just authentic, they're brave enough to tell their truth.
You're nailing it, is like, that goes back to that genuineness. And this is actually, I could expand on that. So like, in order to have a voice, you've got to have a philosophy. You've got to have a platform. My friend Rob, on my very first podcast, Rob Braddock said this line. He said, every man's got to have a code. And I thought about that, and I had a code that I adopted from like Stoicism for a little while. And I actually feel like that I don't know if do you familiarize yourself with Stoicism and all that?
Yeah. I mean, who isn't today? I mean, it's mandatory, right?
Almost, but yeah, like one of the things I didn't like about it is I saw it take me down a path where it obstructed my boundaries to a degree, where this idea of like be very tolerant of others and very harsh on yourself. I remember I let people get away with a lot of bad behavior in the name of Stoicism. Like I can't control what they do, and it's like, but I did a bad job of like still being assertive. So I've got like a weird beef with Stoicism. But Rob told me every man's got to have a code. And so I started reflecting on what's my code, and I started putting pieces together. I've got like 3 or 4 things. The niceness thing is one. And I decided that I had nice guys finish last. I changed that code to needy guys finish last.
That's good. I like that.
Life is struggle, which I adopted. I just stole that from Buddha. And then because there's a lot of people who feel like life should be easy, and as soon as you just say, okay, well, life is struggle, well, now you can relinquish that gripe and expectation, and you can get to work. And the third one is the game is played in the field, and I feel like something as a writer and as an introvert I struggle with all the time. Not so much, I slip into it now, but being trapped in my head instead of living.
Mean? Oh.
So
Get
yeah,
out there and do it.
The field, we're in the field right
Right,
now,
right.
and instead of being in my head thinking about the next question I want to ask you, or where I want to take this conversation, I want to make sure I cover this point.
Mhm.
Sort of like let this conversation go,
Yeah.
and just be with the conversation
Right,
as it
yeah,
unfolds.
Yeah, that's good. I hadn't thought of it that way. There's a something I learned I've talked about one of my jujitsu instructors when I was early into it. This is 20 years ago. You had jujitsu, very technical. There's 1,000 techniques, moves,
Mm-hmm.
and I would keep asking him. He's a very high level guy, and Marcus, what about this? What are we, like very common. Finally got tired. He goes, Mark, there are 1,000 questions you just do. There's only one answer: training. And so as soon as he said, I was like kind of humiliated a little bit. Like it was obviously so true, and we're very close, but it just I could see that. I felt bad for him because I realized I've been pestering him for a year and a half with these questions, and he is of course 100% right. You have to they call it flow. You have to get to a place where you can be in the flow, and that requires being the present, and it requires doing it, not just planning or learning about it. But
It's such like what you're saying is the trouble with that advice is it's so obvious.
yeah,
And it's so simple.
Mhm.
You want to write a whole book on it, but it's like actually my book's only one sentence.
right.
And I had that conversation. I mean, I have that conversation every day. I had someone. So I have like a copywriting Discord, like a community,
Mhm.
and I get this maybe once, twice a week, which is like, how can I learn copy faster?
Right.
There's some variation of this. So someone hit me up and said, I'm trying to get a job. Like, how can I practice or do, like, how can I get skilled enough to do this or learn faster or blah, 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 blah. Always some variant of like learning the skill, mastering
Right.
the skill. And the bothersome thing is if they're in my community, they've already heard me say it 1,000 times. And I stole this from Joe Schrieffer when I was at Agora Financial, which was read a piece of copy, write a piece of copy, and come up with an idea a day. That's the training. So when you said the training, like I don't know if the camera caught me. I was like, oh my God, that's what I say every day. Like I had a dude who's in my highest tier, sort of like private circle, hit me up and asked that question. And I was like, how could you ask me that? Like, he said, well, I call it do the least is my principle, my philosophy on that. Because you're doing the most when I give you advice and the follow-up question is, yeah, but besides that. Yeah, but what else? Like, stop right there. You've already complicated what is
Right.
the practice. Just
Yeah.
do the practice.
Right.
You're not doing it. You're in your
Yeah.
head trying to imagine like all these.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah. Very true. Yeah. Well, mentoring is a whole thing in and of itself. Somebody asked me a question about that. One of my former proteges. It's a very interesting, difficult challenge. You ask sometimes they say, why did I spend so much time mentoring people? And I don't know exactly, but it has to be a pleasure in and of itself. You have to be happy to it's like giving anything. You have to be happy with the giving of the gift. If you're looking for anything in return, it's not a good way to approach it. I don't know why I'm going off on that direction.
Well,
but,
I can meet you there. Is like I remember Joe asked me this when I first started the YouTube channel was 2018 or 19, and I was just basically just talking copy, and he asked me just like, why are you doing this? And I think the way he asked me was a pragmatic question.
Right.
Like, are you building a list? Or you
Right.
got an offer? What are you doing?
Right.
He said, why are you doing this? And I said, I don't know. I just like to.
Hmm.
And I remember whatever I said was like, I just want to. It stopped the question cold. It stopped the whole conversation. I feel like he was going to give me some sort of advice on how to build the list or make an offer. And I just said, I just like it.
Yeah.
And he was like, huh. And then we switched subjects. And I just remember that moment in time. I was like, what was he going to ask me? Why would he ask me? What was he going to say or do? And I was just like, I like sharing and I like teaching it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that he decided to change the topic or agreed to change the topic because you were already on your path, and he knew that instinctively, at least, that your success would depend on the tenacity of staying on your path. And he probably, knowing you, he probably just said, all right, well. I mean, that's what I would say if anybody said just one. I wouldn't like pursue it anymore, because that's all you want. And you certainly don't want to say to somebody, wow, you got a lot of balls because you're really dumb. There's a couple times I felt that way about people I worked with. I've told the story before. I'll make it very quick and vague. But I think maybe one of the 5 most successful copywriters in our world was, I was mentoring for years, and I just got to the point when I was thinking, I think I'm going to just let him know. He's not going to make it, he doesn't. And then one of my other proteges invited them to come and work with him. And a year later, he was like a superstar. So I guess that one of the things that tells you is that, and this is true of athletes, right? You get a coach, and at some point in time, as you're moving up, going towards the Olympics, you got to get another coach. And so, yeah, that's what happened. But I think what we're kind of talking about is that if you just make a decision that you're going to do it because you're going to enjoy the process, then you already got your reward. And if you can get financial success out of it or other things, that would be great, and they'll come with you.
That's, with that, the idea of enjoying the process. So this is something, I feel like I'm at this weird chasm or growing pains where I decided to get serious about the whole mentor thing and making copy products.
Right.
And so I decided, okay, we're going to turn this into a business. I'm going to have people that work for me. We're going to pay them. I'm going to make money. And I feel like I'm in that weird stretch point because it was kind of just like me and 2 of my buddies, and we all have some level of skill at some things. And I'm at a point now where, and I'm working with Todd Browns is going to help us grow this and get it off the ground and make it bigger. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
And I'm just at this point where, transitioning from this thing where I wake up and I kind of just do it to having infrastructure and systems and processes. And I have this sort of nagging, I don't know if you call it a limiting belief, you could maybe even call it a fear that I'm not a business owner, or I don't have the requisite skills to manage a business. We have a weekly call on Tuesdays, and I'm so slow to get to this, but what are these people's accountabilities? I can't really name these things, and I don't even know how to put these things on them, and keep track of it. I understand what I want to accomplish at an idea level,
Right.
but I just can't get it onto a spreadsheet or into an SOP. There's this huge gap that's frustrating me, and that's probably gotta be something you've.
Well, I would say this. I think your concern comes from the fact that you've been exposed to successful people that believe that the way to be successful in business is to follow a certain pattern and do certain things. And I never did that. I didn't know that you were supposed to do that. So everything I did was, off the cuff. And my partner in Agora, we grew that company one time before we sold a portion of it, was over $1 billion in sales. We never had a plan. We didn't, not even an inkling. If somebody asked us, we'd be like, we have no idea. And the people that came to work for us, some of them ran their businesses that way with formal meetings. And, you got to make sure you were clear to everybody. Nobody knew. People would come in, they wanted to write for us, and we said, okay, there's a chair. Start writing. And then you come to us and say, Bill did this better than me. They would say, what do you think I should do? He goes, I don't really know. And that was the whole thing. That was his thing.
That was in the Agora Black Book. I read that line. It stuck with me very much.
So when I see young, CEOs or managers that are following these formulas, I just think, good luck with that. I mean, personally, I don't believe it. I think you have to be fluid. And look, people, especially when you have less than, I've written about this too in a couple of my books, when you have less than 60 employees, 50 employees, you don't need to worry about communication. Everybody knows exactly what you want, and you don't have to say it. You can say contradictory things. They figure it out. There's 50 people. They know you're the man. You're the guy that can fire them if you get annoyed. So their job, if they're smart and they're worth keeping, is to like figure you out, right? And we've all done that with people. We learned it with our teachers when we were kids. Figure this person out, and then so none of that stuff really matters. And as a business leader, you just have to keep, coming up with ideas that can grow the business, and also be humble enough, or maybe not the right word, or be sensible enough to recognize other ideas that are different from yours that might work. And I don't think, think about all the different approaches successful people have had. It's not like a formula.
So one of the things that you said, and this line really resonated. I use it almost every day, and it's the line. I'll elaborate for folks watching. Is the line from the Agora Big Black Book that you wrote was, you saw someone approach Bill Bonner and say, "Hey, I have a question. Should we do X or do Y?" And Bill says, the line in the book says, "I never saw Bill tell anybody what to do." That's what the line was.
Right.
And he would say, "What do you think?"
Right.
And I use that all the time. And I explain to them, too, because I don't want them to feel like I'm being lazy or giving away the responsibility.
Right.
I want them to feel like I'm empowering them to make the decision and to own this role.
Yeah.
Like they're the people growing this, and they're responsible for growing it. And I love that philosophy. Okay, but then where does like the actual technical, like if the person says, I don't know what to do, like I don't have the clue what to do or how to do it.
Okay, so there's two ways. First of all, I'm going to clarify something. We were first talking about like having a specific plan and formulas to which I never did. But I always would tell people exactly what to do. I was the kind of person, very direct. I knew what to do. We have some porters like that. We have some people that are like that in the business. And but when I saw that Bill would never tell anybody what to do, Bill was the major shareholder, and I was smart enough to figure out I could get a lot of people to do different things. But if Bill didn't think what I was doing was a good idea, he would start to lose confidence in me, and I was growing the business. So so I think that what Bill does, if you decide to take that approach, what Bill does is, I don't know if I should tell you, most people don't know it, but you got to, if you don't know it, then you know Bill. And you tell him, and he goes, I'm not sure about that. And then he doesn't say anything else. And then if he came to me, he said, what did he mean? He means you're an idiot, and if you do that, if you're still here 6 weeks doing that, you're gone. He's going to be asking he's going to be saying to your boss, what's going on with it? So he will never ever be rude, but he definitely.
That's your job. You're a bad cop.
That's what I do, yeah. But Bill, that's why I think we work so together. And sometimes I actually have done that. After we finish a meeting, I bring, if I like the guy, he just thinks what you're doing is idiotic, right? You can go ahead and do it. I'm just letting you know. So, yeah.
So that kind of brings me to I want to go back to this point. So I feel like one of the ceilings or limitations, I won't be able to grow my business or get to a point. This is why I want to lean so heavily on folks like Todd. He's being very generous with his time and his team.
Right.
But I feel like I don't want to say my people are unfireable. I don't wish to fire them. Right. They don't really do it. They do the best they can, right. the full energy that they have. But at what point do you need to sort of? I don't want to be.
Yeah.
I don't want to dismiss anybody's expertise. I don't want to be the smartest man in the room, right? That's what I'm worried about. Is that in terms of like execution, taking action, and growing this thing, I'm worried that I don't have someone that like can tell me no and here's why. Like, no, you're wrong, and I know better. I would love to have that voice in the room, and So my question is sort of, do you have to have strong key experts on your team? Like, how? That's the question. How do you build a team? Like, if I'm a dude with two buddies, right?
Right.
At what point do you need to say? Do you ever say, look, buddy, you need to do some this serious? You need to go pay $100,000 to someone who's an expert and bring them on and turn this thing around, or what?
Well, kind of. I can say a couple of things. There's a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely need people that are really good. Whether they're smarter than you or not, they're better at figuring some stuff out than you are,
Mm-hmm.
doing some things than you are to grow your business. There's no question about that. I've worked with many people, I can say a half dozen, who were brilliant and who controlled everything. And their business grew to a certain level. Maybe $20 million was the best. I could tell they would never grow beyond that because they refused to, whether they did consciously or not, to hire people that were better than them. They hired good people, but not that were. So to me, that's an ego problem that I don't have. I have all the other ego problems. This is the one I don't have. And Bill didn't have it either. And Tom Phillips, who was a big publisher before we got big, he didn't have it either. What you need is to be attracted to people that are super smart and can get things done. Like literally attracted to them. That's how I would describe it. I see somebody that is super smart, and of course it's more than just being smart, but is capable, and I think, oh man, I want that guy in my life somehow, and that woman in my life, and that's what I would say is the difference of all the people I know that have built great businesses, great people. The only unifying characteristic is that what I would call this attraction. Mm-hmm. Somebody like Bill, who's very reticent, he would never say, you should work for me. But when he sees somebody like that, he goes after them. He grooms them very quietly. You don't know. I mean, he stole our best person from me, or from my brother. Mm-hmm. Porter was working for my brother. And Bill met him and was so impressed by him. I was singing his praises. That he somehow, very quietly, next thing I knew, he was in Baltimore. My brother's like, what the hell? I found that guy, So, yeah, so it's to me, and Tom Phillips was like that too. I would go out with Tom while I was, starting to build a business when people realized I was the growth guy. And I'd go, Mark, that would be really wonderful if we could somehow connect, Let me take you on a ride, and I was like, oh, thanks, Tom. But so that's how in his case, I think the attraction was a full-fledged attraction, but that's how I describe it. And so somehow you have to, I think that's the most important thing. You have to try to figure out if you have that sense of being attracted to these people, and if you don't, it's going to be a problem. The people that want to do everything themselves, they feel at some level threatened. They may not recognize that they feel that way, but you could tell by their actions that they avoid. For me, if somebody's smart and I know they can, I don't care if they're overpowering or obnoxious. I just want to work with them. So
I think it's. I'm gonna make this about me now, I guess. Right. I think one of the things that would be for me would be the opposite of feeling threatened. It's an inferiority thing, to be frank. It's an insecurity thing where I know what I'm really good at. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm scared to go write health copy because I would lose the powers that I have in the financial copy space and the skill and the so I'm scared. Like, as we're talking, there are people that you're describing this attraction. There are people that are popping in my head. And it's like, I just feel unworthy to pitch them and say, why don't you join my little, Tonka trunk Mickey Mouse business and help me grow it? I just feel like it's not worth their time. I feel like I have this gift to inspire people. Like the people who work for me. I mean, like, I feel like they're just there because it's me, right? I'm not offering anything exceptional, like in terms of compensation or like lifestyle. I'd like to. I'd
Right.
love to give them the world, and I think they see that. I think, yeah. So I don't know, man. That's it. Like I feel like, do I have enough money for this person?
Right.
Can I actually use this person and use
Right.
their skills, or would they want to even work for my
Right.
little
Well, this
team?
is what I
Or,
would say about that. What you do give people, whether you do consciously or not, a sense that you have a future,
Mhm.
you know, and that you're open to it. Something's going on, and that's why they want to hang around. Is that Frank? Frank?
Yep,
Hi. Frank, we're doing an interview. What time is it?
it's 12 to 5, but Tina, if you want to wait?
You don't have to go outside, but we're,
Okay.
there's no one
Let's get
shot where we
moving.
both get in, is there?
but you can hang out here and just listen if you want.
All right.
Sure. Oh, sorry. Where were we?
Well, the actual, what time does does the book club start? At 6 or 7?
7.
At 7, yeah. You're here really early. Anyway,
We'll pick up the food.
oh yeah, okay. Well, we'll just have to do the best we can. I'm sorry about this. But Frank is here for the 7 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Well, is there... All right.
We're live apparently. It's all right. We'll figure this out. Let's get back to what
That was like the crux of like my whole life. You're about to
No, I
answer,
know, I know.
and then man.
So they have that. I have a button here I press when I can't figure out the answer. It just hangs out there.
He
waits.
interrupts it.
So that's going for you. And like I was saying, if you see that, what I would do in your situation, I'm trying to remember if I've had that in the past, because I have a little bit of the other thing, like I am a little bit competitive with people that are good, but somehow I have both.
Mm-hmm.
I guess when it became my business, and I could imagine them being in my business, I saw nothing but growth. And so, but what I did find out was that what you should do, and never hurts, is just to say something to the person that puts that thought in your head. Even if you said, you know what, it would be so cool. I just have this fantasy of you being in my business one day and us helping to build a business.
Mhm.
It's just a compliment. I don't know how many times I can tell you. That's what I used to say. I used to say, boy, or if it's somebody that, if there was somebody that was like wasn't running a business, but like a copywriter or something, I would say, boy, you really should be working for us, you know. But I just said it lightly, and a year or two later, you get a call. You know, something goes wrong, but they remember that because it's a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
And all you're doing then is giving them your truthful compliment about what you admire about them. And you're not, and it takes away the pressure of them saying no or thinking that you're whatever, because all you're doing is complimenting them.
Yeah. There's got to be a certain level of, I guess, assurance or confidence in your belly when you say you should. That's the thing that I feel like
You
I'm
don't
lacking.
have to quite say that. You can make it, figure out a way to say it that's like authentic. Like you could say, boy, I wish my business were big enough to have you come in and be part of our business.
Oh, that's
You know?
far more authentic to
Yeah,
my.
far more authentic, and that's what you're really feeling.
Mhm.
But I know I could never afford you. Now it's starting to sound like a line, right?
Yeah.
Is that authentic? Yeah, no, I really couldn't afford you. But yeah, so I think that's, to me, that will work because you're not trying to sell something you can't buy.
Mhm.
You're not trying to buy something you can't afford or make a promise you can't keep. But anybody that's good at something, and that, you know, everybody appreciates a sincere compliment and an invitation. It's no obligation if you just say, I know this couldn't, it's not reasonable, but this is something I just will let you know I think would be so cool. It's just a very nice compliment, and who knows, you know, you can say to the person, well, let's talk about it. What you don't know is he just quit his job or, you know,
Yeah,
got in a fight with his partner. Or,
In our industry, and I know a lot of people have been asking me about. There's two questions everyone's going to lose their mind if I don't ask, which I'll get to at some point. AI and copywriting, which I have my own opinion on. And the other one is like the future of the industry, not just because of AI, but because of all the layoffs in the market and everything. And there are a lot of people now who are looking for work, and I could probably employ them. And you said something earlier, like my job is to have ideas, and my cup runneth over. I feel like the way that I damage my business is too many ideas. Like I keep pulling us in too many directions. Like I want to do this.
Right.
Like I got bored. Like as soon as I had a team and I wasn't doing everything,
Mm-hmm.
I started a podcast. Like, what the hell, Kyle? Why'd you start a podcast? Like, I got bored.
Right.
So I just started doing podcasts and call people. Hey, would come on my podcast? Like, when'd you get a podcast? I don't know.
Right.
That's almost like my damage
Yeah.
is I need someone that when I say, like, I have this idea for a physical product I badly wanted to do for like last 6 months. And it's like, how do I print this and ship it when they go to ClickFunnels and enter their address? Like, I don't know how to do that.
Right.
And I'll tell you something else, man. This is like an admission. I was an accountant once, and I was an auditor. And I think the reason I failed at that is I remember like sitting and staring at these spreadsheets, and I couldn't do anything but stare. I couldn't do anything. My brain wouldn't do the things with the information. When it comes to setting up a ClickFunnels integration, an active campaign email tag or segment, my brain goes into this erratic, like frazzled state. So it's like I know exactly what I want to get done,
Right.
but I can't sit in front of a ClickFunnels and then integrate it with, I don't know, whatever thing I got to do to
Right.
make it send this product out when
Yeah.
they, and that's where I just like I have like I give up.
Yeah. Well, that may be because your business is, I don't want to say so small that you can't just go out and hire this person that knows how to do that. They'll probably cost you minimum $80,000 a year to do something that for you is kind of a mechanical thing. I mean, I certainly wouldn't know what to do, and yeah. So, but all I can tell you is that as the business gets bigger, and you can afford that kind of expertise, you got to get somebody. that
How
can
do you?
it.
What do you like? You bump into? Do you go to events anymore? Like
No, I mean almost never. No.
You would get swarmed, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you just absolutely get bombarded?
I don't know if I get swarmed, but maybe if I was a speaker, I would get swarmed afterwards. That's happened to me, but yeah, I don't know if Let me just say that if I went to any event, I know that some people would recognize me. In fact, it happens to me, probably twice a year, which is about perfect. You're on a plane, somebody comes up to you and they feel.
You know what would probably be more likely to happen? You'd probably get one of me. Porter was at a financial marketing summit, and someone was like, "I want to go talk to Porter," and I was like, "About what?" He's like, "I want to go talk to Porter." So I like walked with him to a point, and then I stood like 15 feet away like a creeper. I just stood there and watched them talk because like I didn't have anything to say or ask or do. So I was just like, I don't want to like. That's another thing. Like even with this podcast, this is something I feel like is very helpful for me. Is I don't have an agenda.
Right.
We're gonna have a conversation. And one of the things that always, dude, I'm telling you, I've got the imposter syndrome. I'm good on camera in my YouTube bubble on my channel where I'm the god. I'm the king there. But like, Rich invited me to the this spot, to the cigar bar thingy where I could hang out with you guys. And my first thought was like, well, what am I supposed to do or say? Or what do I bring to the table? What can I say to these people that isn't boring?
I would say remind you of this, that what you bring to the table when you're young and you feel like you don't have, but you have more to offer, what you're bringing to the table is your actual youth and your desire to learn. If you're hanging around people that are, in any area quite accomplished, they don't want to just be hanging out with each other all the time. I mean, it's great. You got great conversations, but you meet young people and they're interested and they actually know what you've done. It's quite flattering. I mean, it's not like we can all be little mini celebrities in our little ponds, but it's not like I'm some famous person that everybody knows I'm being harassed. It's nice to be to have somebody come up and ask you questions. So I think that again it's kind of like the other question. You have, I would say, if you're making a mistake, it's in thinking that that you need to like right away pay off people. Being interested in somebody, I mean, what's better feeling than somebody that's interested in you or somebody that wants to listen to you? You never, talk about the imposter syndrome, no matter how good you get, you never stop appreciating somebody that believes that you have something worthwhile to say. So to me, that's an equal exchange. You know, if you just, the hard part is going up to the person, interrupting them and saying, you know, I just wanted to say hello and so on. And, you know, of course, you know.
Just, I wanted to say hello.
Yeah.
I love your work.
Yeah.
I love Ready, Fire, Aim.
Yeah.
I wanted
Yeah.
to come say hello.
Yeah, that's a big, I mean, maybe other people are beyond it, but I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people that, you know, actually my wife and my family, for our family office or whatever, I heard these people that are on the soft side. It's about, they call it corporate governance, but it's really about how to talk to each other in a corporate setting. Just, none of us are really into that kind of thing, but, you know, because it's, you know, how do you feel about this? What kind of leader are you? And what's your love language? So, you know,
Like your corporate love
Irish,
language?
yeah, Irish Catholic families, we were all like cringing.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, it worked out very, very well. In terms of the love language, this has actually become pretty popular. Like 5 traits.
Yeah.
You know, you like physical affection. You like
Quality time.
Yeah, quality time.
Physical
Yeah,
touch,
right.
words of affirmation, gifts, and
Right.
deeds
Yeah,
or
good, you got
gestures or
it.
something like that.
So we all took our little things, and everybody was like, you know, had 2 or 3 things that were there, that were up on top, and things that were low. I had 0 and 1 5, 1 10 or whatever it was, words of affirmation. Apparently, all I care about is being affirmed, you know. And so I was like, wow. But I've always said, you know, flattery gets you anywhere with me, because even I am perfectly thrilled to have somebody flatter me that I know is totally ingenuous. They're just trying to get something out of me. It still feels just as good
Okay.
in some bizarre way. So I did explain to my wife. She has time and service.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you know, you're so lucky, because all you have to do to make me feel loved is just flatter me.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even have to be sincere. For you, I have to give service and a lot of time. It kind of feels like slavery to me, doesn't it? So anyway, yeah, I don't know why we were talking about that. Oh yeah, so what I'm saying is that just giving somebody attention as somebody that doesn't have a lot to bring to the table is bringing a lot to the table. That's what I'm
Okay.
saying, yeah.
All right.
So I think of course, you know, it's easy to say something, hard to do. I was never able to do that myself.
Yeah. I imagine the scenario when you said, just go up and say, I want to say hello.
Right.
And so I imagine a cool, calm, and collected individual walking up, hey, again, love Ready, Fire, Aim,
Right.
totally changed the way I look at business and my life, and I just want to say hello.
Yeah.
Most normal people would just leave it there. I have this weird thing. I was at a wedding
Right.
about 2 or 3 weeks ago. One of my boyhood friends, like I got a friend from like 4th grade, still keeping. I have a couple of those actually. You got any of those like
Oh
old?
yeah, absolutely. I have a whole crew.
Good for you.
Yeah, from grammar school.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
I was at his wedding. I was a groomsman, and I remember like his wife looked so lovely in her dress. Like she looked great, and I don't know how to give compliments. People who know me know this about me. And so I did this like word vomit about how great she looked until I was like still talking, and she's like, okay, I gotta go say hi to them. And I was like, yes, please, just leave me. Get away from me, because
I'll keep talking.
I can't
You-
stop saying, oh, you
I'll
look
turn-
so great. Like, where'd you get this job? Oh my God, your makeup's perfect. Oh my God. And I was like, I would do the same thing. I
Yeah.
know exactly how I would mess up that I just wanted to say hello. I could
Right.
mess that up. I could walk up and be like, just want to say hello,
Right.
and that I love you,
Yeah.
and that this book was
Right.
amazing, and then,
Yeah.
oh my God, and I can't shut up.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. I'm sure you've been a bit on the other side of it too, and I would say that what I don't like is when somebody comes up and they say hello to me and they want me to know that they're not intimidated by me.
Mm.
Like, I find that kind of off-putting, you know,
Mhm.
because it's fake.
Mhm.
They're coming up to me in these events when people are they're coming up to me because I am in this tiny little world, a celebrity that they want to meet, but they want me to know that it's not a compliment that they're at my level. And I just, again, it's authenticity. It's just bullshit, I'd much rather have somebody like stuttering and just, of course I'm going to love that person. I'm like, come on, let's spend an hour together. Let me tell and then the other, which happens occasionally. So everything's
Yeah, I'm definitely the stumbling, bumbling guy. And it's crazy because, I've got the YouTube persona. So I have a YouTube channel where I teach like basic copywriting stuff. And it's like people assume that I'm an extrovert. Why?
Right.
Because I'm always in a monologue when they see me,
Right.
where nobody's even talking about. I'm just talking, because
Right.
they see me on a YouTube thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, then I feel like I have this persona I need to upkeep when I bump into
I
these
totally
people.
understand that. I have the same thing. In fact, my impression of you was very, self-confident and so on from reading your stuff, and also from just meeting you. I had that too because when I was coming up, when I first started writing in 2000 about business, I was already 50 years old, and I already mentored 300 younger people. And so I started writing about whatever I was writing about with an avatar in my mind of a young guy that was going to lap up everything I said. So if you have that kind of an audience, you can be very, very direct, very confident. Just listen to me. You can make jokes, and it works. But then later on, but it was artificial, and so when I would meet people, they would go, "Oh, I can't believe you have a sense of humor. You seem so relaxed," and I had that same problem. I was like, I know how to be that person, and I'm authentically that person. If I'm talking to, mostly, I would say it's mostly men for me, honestly, because I've mentored plenty of young women, but I'm not. I'm more kind or delicate with them, which is I'm sure it's wrong, but I notice that I am, and so that was the persona that I developed writing Early to Rise and all those books. But then in the last couple of years, I started to write to an avatar of somebody that's my age. It's just more interesting for me, and then I have to change the habit of, because like I'm talking to you, if I'm talking to somebody that's not my protege, I can't be, talking down to them, as it were.
Yeah. And by the way, I pulled my phone out while you were talking. I wanted you to know I was not like checking text. I was actually pulling up some of the questions that I had, so that whenever I get to before I do leave, I want to make sure I hit some of these questions. I wasn't just like checking my Facebook or something over here.
I was so boring that you were just. Apparently, I'm arrogant enough not to have even thought of that.
Oh no. Yeah. So the idea of like the persona. So like this is something that again, like in sort of my quest for like what I've been doing with the podcast, and I remember, I've told this story a couple times. I remember when I lost my sense of humor, so to speak. And it's funny because, like, again, when I was talking to Kevin, he said I was funny until I became a CEO. I remember I was on a call with all my writers, and I made a crack. I gave someone a ribbon, I made a joke at their expense.
Right.
And I didn't find out till later that I, like, shattered that guy's day because I'm the boss.
Yeah.
And I did it in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And to me, that's something I would do with any of my boys.
Right.
And to me, I thought we were boys.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm trying to figure out that balance where I can be. I'm an abrasive and direct speaker, like you described. Like when I talk to people and give advice, and I almost feel like when I'm in my community, like even twice today, I'm like, man, I hope this dude isn't pissed off at me.
Yeah.
Because I was like, you screwed this up. Like
Yeah.
that's like that. That's like how I gave feedback. It's like I tell you these are the rules. This is what you do in line 1, line 2, and you screwed it up.
Yeah.
But some people, I would say 2 out of 3 times or 3 out of 4 times, they will respond with thanks for like straightening me out. I'll get a DM. I had a DM from a guy that said, I've been going through some mental stuff. And you kicking my ass in copy actually helped me sort it, like in his personal life.
Right.
And I was like, I don't even know how to respond. I'm
Right.
glad, but like,
Okay, so here's my thought on that. I think for everybody, if you think about the conversations that you had with teachers or people that you were in the position of bosses or whatnot, the ones that really were pivotal in your development, most of them were criticisms. That's where you really learn. So I have the same, I can't tell you, at your age, I was way worse than you could ever imagine yourself, believe me. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, you made me cry. Every woman I ever worked with, for
Right.
sure. And even some guys I made cry, which is quite an accomplishment. But
quite an accomplishment.
I remember writing on this is when we used to critique with a pen on paper. It was a promotion, and I wrote, did you even graduate high school? That was my comment. So.
That's a personal.
Yeah.
That's personal.
Okay, so I told you it was even worse than you would do.
Oh, yeah.
Because I would, when I would see bad copy, I would think that it was an assault on me. Now in this day of wokeness, if somebody's hurt by something, they've got a legitimate crime.
Yeah.
Gripe. That's how I felt. I felt anybody that wasn't a good writer was personally attacking me, and I was angry at them. And
I understand
yeah.
this.
So what I think what my solution is, and you may have already done this, is when I start working with somebody, I started doing this about 20 years ago. I find something, if I want to keep working with them, there's something about them that I really like and I think is strong. And I let them know that. And what I notice is, especially because of the the way I am and probably the way you are, it's a little intimidating for new people to work with us. So they're kind of, they're afraid that the first thing they'll do is yell at them. And so if you can say something about what they're doing, that's a quality, like you have a great natural voice, or you can say, I've never seen anybody dig up better facts than you, or whatever it is. That person, because of their intimidation, will bring that into their heart like they needed to live, and they'll always remember it, and they'll get better at that one thing. As long as they're working with you, they'll work on that. But of course, there's other things they need to learn along the way. But as long as you set that foundation with them, and they trust that you're on their side, and you have to be, you can't fake that. You have to want them to improve. But if you communicate what you think they're very good at, and then they know you want them to improve, then later on you can hit them with a criticism. But I totally understand it. There are many times when I've said something to someone, and I said, I don't know if I built up enough foundation to have said what I just said to this person. And if I haven't, then I'm going to lose them. They're going to want to disregard me and
Yeah, there's every person's different, and
Yeah.
but there's a breaking point where it's like, man, you're just an asshole.
Right.
Like, I don't
Yeah.
like you anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear your advice anymore. Is what you describe very far off from a compliment sandwich? Like, hey, you're great, but
No, because a compliment sandwich happens at the same time.
Okay.
This has to be completely genuine, and all you're doing is giving them a compliment. And I would do it more than once. And you want to really back it up, you say that, which is I do, in front of other people. I'm thinking of one copywriter right now, that one of my first guys that I mentored. He's the guy that has a great voice. He's very well known. It's Paul Hollingshead. Paul was working in a supermarket, but he did have just a voice, because he comes from New Hampshire or something. You get closer to Canada and people just, they're more sincere. And he had that in his voice, and I said that, and I would say it to other people, even when I knew there was a little bit of risk of jealousy. The people that were competing with, but I knew I was setting that in. And he would always have that skill. I could feel it. And it was genuine. And so then and once he knew that I loved him and was 100% in his corner, then I could say practically anything I wanted
Yeah,
to.
well, he knows where it's coming from. It's coming from tough love.
Yeah.
There's something that I say, almost like, in financial copy, you make a bunch of claims and show proof, and then you go, by the way, past performance is no guarantee of future results, and you sort of disclaim and hedge and walk it back a little bit. I sort of do that with copy, where I'll go through the whole thing, and at the end, I say something. The line that I say is, I'm critiquing your copy, not you.
Right.
That's whenever you said, did you graduate high school? Like, you're just,
Right.
That's like, you went straight for the guy. But, so I'm critiquing your copy, not you. But at the same time, when I read the copy, the thing that you said, it's not a strange thing to say. Like, I feel like this is a personal attack on me.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm reading the copy, I did like a little video feedback thing just 2 days ago where I was like, listen, because I was ranting. I was like, I was animated.
Right.
And I was like, why am I doing this? So I said, listen, the reason I'm doing this, it's because I'm the reader.
Right.
I'm the reader, and you want me to read this shit? Like, you talked about nothing for 4 to 6 lines in a 8-line email? Like, where's the thing where you talk about...
You're getting pretty close to did you go to high school?
Yeah.
That one, yeah.
Right? So, but I try to keep the topic on the
Right,
email.
no, I know, but I don't think that that's a strongest way to do it. I would recommend my system. Because,
That's you critiquing. That's not the strongest
because,
way.
well, look, it's like you said in the copy, if you say, but past results don't indicate future performance, nobody reads that, nobody cares about that. And when you say,
Right.
listen, I'm just critiquing the copy, not you.
It's too late.
He doesn't
Damage
care
is
about
done.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because especially younger writers as they're developing, younger anything, they don't know if they will ever succeed. And so that's why I think it's so important to well, first of all, it's so important that they can do something well. If they can't do something well, what I've learned to do is I don't criticize them harshly.
Okay.
It's kind of like what Bill does. I just want to remove myself from them because I don't want to waste my time on them. If I just decide,
Oh, that's the worst.
yeah,
That's
that this person, well, because it's a practical thing at some point in time. You don't want to be spending, 500 hours mentoring somebody that you believe will not. Maybe that person will, like I said, I've been wrong before, but it'll be extremely frustrating. You'll end up being angry at the person.
Yeah.
But if you can genuinely find something that you like about their skill set and let them know, then you'll be forming a bond that will make criticism easier later on.
Your system, as you call it, which is basically be nice to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a weird thing that I struggle with, and like I mentioned earlier, I don't know how to give a compliment. I fail at execution. Like if it was Dance Dance Revolution and you're supposed to push right when the right arrow comes, I would get the bad every time I'm supposed to execute compliment. Bad. Like I misfire on that, and I often am guilty of the crime that you mentioned, where like the way you just put it, like, sort of made me have like a personal revelation, where it's like, if they can't do anything good, like if I don't give them that validation at any point, and I think I'm bad for that. I think because I am so bad at delivering compliments, that they never ever get one from me, and that I feel like at some point, I've seen this happen throughout the span of my life, not just my career, but like at some point someone kind of gives up on just fuck it, Kyle's impossible.
Yeah, like we're all looking for love and validation. So yeah, if you're not giving out any of it, but on the other hand, Bill, I told you about when I interpret and I say, he just said he thinks you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know about that. But on the other hand, don't ever expect him to say, wow, that was really good. Never have I heard him say anything was really good or good. The most he'll say is, oh, I think you might have something there. That's it. That's the high. And so I've been telling that to people too. You just got the highest compliment. I've gotten that twice in working with Bill for all these years, You are so fucking lucky. So again, people are very smart about this kind of thing. They figure these signals out, and I think you can be your authentic self. But in terms of being an effective mentor and dealing with criticism. This sounds corny. This is something Jay Abraham told me once, but I think you have to love the person you're working with. I don't mean be in love with them, but I mean actually like care that they get better. And if you feel like you can help them, it's very easy to feel that way. You know, for me it is. It's like, wow, I can help this person. It's going to feel good by helping them. And so I try to like channel that. What I would think, you know, I know you're being purposefully self-critical because it allows us to get deeper into the conversation, but I'll bet you if you think about some of the mentees that you work with and that you've done I'm not criticizing you, I'm criticizing, if I were you, I would say, ask yourself, is there something that they do that you think is quite good, you know, especially for that level? If it's not, then I would say you got to think about, you know, of course, if they're paying you for it, then then you can't be mean.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, you go to a spa and you want a Swedish massage and you start punching your back. You know, it's just not what you paid for.
It's not what I paid for.
Yeah. Oh.
Jermaine C. has a question that kind of falls along the topic that you're discussing right now.
Oh, we got a question. Sure. If you click the question, it'll pop up on the screen
Hey,
too.
can I fill up with
Yeah, why don't you do that? This would be a perfect time to fill
Okay.
up your bathroom break, all
Great.
that stuff,
All
and
right,
I can
great.
look at the question
Okay.
while you do it.
All right, terrific. Thanks.
All right, I was actually wondering how we would slip a bathroom break into this, because 3 hours is a minute. All right. Question. Hey, guys. If both of you had no name or reputation and you wanted to write a cold personal letter for a potential mentor, how would you structure it, and what research would you do for it? Ooh, that's a big one. That's a big one. So, I feel like I can answer this because this is a tactical question, and I want to answer from like a philosophical question. I said something to Mark real early in this. Is like, I think I call myself stupid like 4 or 5 times, and one of the yeah, Mark was like, shut up. One of the things I got that, and I've learned to embrace that because of an idol of mine, Stephen Pressfield, in this book he wrote called "Do the Work." He says the artist's greatest allies are stupidity and arrogance. And I noticed that in the circumstances where I advanced my life or met someone I needed to, where luck struck me, where luck was on my side, was when I was stupid and arrogant. And that's true for when I got my job at Agora Financial. Joe had done a podcast with Kevin Rogers and said, hey, we're looking for copywriters. Just send me an email why you think you'd be good for the job. I'm looking for these 3 things. So I answered the email, and then I sent him an email with what he asked for, and he didn't answer me back. So then I was like kind of pissed off about it, arrogant. I didn't know who I was talking to or what copywriting was. I was actually trying to learn copy so I could write novels and sell novels. And so I sent him a response. I replied myself, and I just wrote BUMP, parentheses, bump with a smiley face. And that was sort of like my way, like, say, hey, guy, answer me. And because I had no pretense for like how I should treat Joe or who he was or what he had built, it was the stupidity and arrogance. I just went after it. And when we got to copy camp, when I was at Agora Financial, and we did like this 8-week copy training, he gave us a book called Obvious Adams. And there's one story in there where like Obvious Adams wanted to work at this business. He wanted to work at this company. And this is such a great story or anecdote or fable or whatever the word is. For people today, like I want to work for this company. I want to write copy for this business. Should I practice over here with this guy and then connect with this guy and then work? Obvious Adams went to the business he wanted to work at, and he walked in the front door of the office and he said, hey, where's the CEO? And then he's like, I want to go talk to him. And they're like, well, do you have an appointment? He's like, no. Is he free? And they're like, well, he's actually free in 20 minutes. And so Obvious Adams says, okay, I'll talk to him then. He sits down, and then he goes into the CEO's office and he talks to him. And he's like, I like your gumption, Adam. Why don't you work for me? And so this question, can we pull it back on the screen one more time for folks who want to see it? Young Jamie. If you both had no name, reputation, wanted to write a cold personal letter for a mentor, how would you structure it and what research would you do for it? So the first thing, because I am burdened, like most of my limits do come from imposter syndrome and insecurity. But I find that when I strike gold is when I'm just aloof and dumb and don't realize even what I'm walking into. I use that as a bit of a strength. It's sort of like my superpower. So often what I'd say is like, don't overthink it, do the least. Like I would just, I don't want to give you like this 5-step plan. I want to sort of give you that mentality of like abundance, I guess I'd say. Like, don't hang all your hopes and dreams on this one person answering the emails, like the first place to start, or else you'll screw it up. That's probably where I'd start with it. And Mark, did you hear that question?
Yeah, I did. I heard it.
I'm gonna refill in bathroom. As
Okay.
Well, while you
Um, Yeah, it's interesting because I've always advised people to, now that we've been having this conversation on authenticity, I'm done with second thinking that, but I've advised people the most important thing to do is to study the business that you want to work for and understand what their biggest challenges are. Understand what if you, I agree 100%. You want to talk to CEO if you can, and but you want to know what's keeping him up at night, and if you feel confident that you can help him with that, that's going to go a long way. But if you think that any successful person wants to hear about how great you are, you're wasting his time. You missed copywriting or persuasion 101. It's got to be about his problems, his needs, and you have to do the homework. You have to you study the business from a tertiary point of view, and then you have to somehow get an inroad where you're talking to employees and you find out what the big concerns are. You have to present yourself as somebody that might be able to solve his problems. You don't want to say, unless you are this good. I mean, if I went to a smaller business, I might say that because I've spent so much time working with small businesses. I might say I know exactly how to fix your problem. In fact, that's going on in our business right now. We are struggling with some problems in our business, and one person that we work with for a long time is retired. He's coming back, and he told us, "I know exactly how to solve your problem. And so we're about to let him take over, a very large business, because he's very confident that he has the answers, and we know that he knows our business very well. He knows and he has a solution. So I'm saying two things. Whatever you do, I think you should try to understand what this person, and it is the CEO, or it's at least the head of marketing, or the lead copywriter, what he's looking for in you. What problem can you solve for him? And it doesn't have to be the ultimate solution. It could be a small problem. It could be a problem with getting somebody that meets their deadlines, or just is great at research, or will do whatever. But if you can discover what those pain points are, this is what we teach you. It's the fundamentals of persuasion, of copywriting, is that you find out what is keeping your customer up at night, what he's worried about, what does he want, and present yourself as somebody that can help him to do that. But yeah, I also agree with what Kyle said. If you just go up and say, like I was saying with just meeting somebody and trying to hire somebody, if you just walk up to somebody and say, "Gee, I want you to know I so admire your business. I love everything you've done about it. I don't think I'm qualified to work for you, but geez, I would love to one day." If you say that to a person that is hiring people, they may hire you just because of your earnest interest in working for their business. But it's interesting that we've been talking about almost entirely about we've been talking about building businesses, but we haven't talked at all about copy. What makes for good copy? And that's okay. I just want to remind Kyle that we haven't covered that topics, and I have a lot of brilliant things to say about that. But one thing I have noticed through American writers and so on is that as soon as people start to learn about copywriting, they want to go right away to finding out how they can be making 6 or 7 figures ASAP. And I always have to say the same thing that was told to me when I wanted to be a creative writer and write fiction is that the first and most important thing you need to do is get better at your craft. And if you start, as like a C player, you can use all the tricks in the world to get noticed and even to get hired. But if you're a C player, it's going to be tough. You want to at least get to a B level and then go from a B to an A after you've been hired with a company. But if you come in as a C, that company may let you go and you may never want to take you back. So.
And thank you. Because I believe Jermaine is inside the Copy Squad Lite program, and he's one of those people that hears that whole thing over and over again, but just practice. Like, people always ask, like, what is the whiz-bang trick to get better faster? And it's like, dude, did you read a piece of copy, write a piece of copy, and come up with an idea? Because through that, you'll garner, it's all about patterns, because copy is a language. So all we're doing is teaching a language. Do you learn tricks to become masterful at Japanese?
Right.
No, you learn you just learn the language.
Right.
And when you approach it that way, it's like, I just need to get familiar with what to say when I'm giving credibility for my guru. What to say, like, is my promise succinct, and is there one idea, the rule of one?
Right.
And the other thing that I always harp on, because they often ask me, like, how do I get clients? Well, if you were good at copy, a lot of that would take care of itself, wouldn't it? Like, if you were actually good at the thing you're trying to get them to pay you to do.
Right.
And I think it's a lot of, it's marketers' fault. It's our faults for selling them these, our unique mechanisms of, like, here's the template to make you $1 million.
Right.
And in my group and my team sending out emails, I'm sure there's probably copy that does something like that, where I'm promising if you buy some sort of product that I made, that it'll help you improve your copy, make $1 bajillion. And at the same time, I go on the lives, I go on YouTube, and I talk to them here, and I say, don't do that, don't think like that. But it's like, it's our fault for doing this.
This is a great topic, and it relates to what I was talking about from jiu-jitsu. The guy I first learned from, yes, please, Gracie, he, on his dojo, he would have 600 techniques that you would learn from going from white belt to blue to purple and so on. And when you came in there as a newbie, you were so excited, and you couldn't wait to learn that, get to the 400 level. So this is a very natural response from people to think that becoming good at something is all a matter of learning all the tricks. And we can't, you would never be able to sell a program in copywriting by saying there are no tricks.
Right.
This is what you have to do. You got to work your ass off, and then in 6 years or 3 years, if you're a genius, you'll be good. And that's all I can tell you. Would you like to buy? I'll tell you that over and over again for $500, $5,000. So what you do, since there's a natural interest in the techniques, and since the techniques have validity in and of themselves, you tend to teach those things. And copywriting, it's worse in the pure marketing area, because marketing people, they're so into these little tricks that they sell a lot of tricks that only work 10% of the time. Whereas I don't think that's true with copywriting. The stuff that is taught in copywriting is more or less the same. If you go to any good guru, they're just the same techniques with different names. But in marketing, I mean, I remember when I was like 5 years into it, and I came to my boss, who became my partner. I said, "Oh my God, I discovered a secret, the secret to breakthrough packages." And he goes, "What?" And I pulled out all these packages from our entire industry, and these were in number 10 envelopes. This is before your time. And I go, and they all had copy on the front. And I said, "What is it? What's coming?" He looks over, he goes, "I don't know." And I go, "Look again." He goes, "I don't know." He goes, "It all looks different to me, like the copy looks different." I go, "But you didn't notice. Manila envelopes, manila covered envelopes, and kind of a purple ink. All the best promotions." So I really thought that was a secret. And of course, as our business got bigger, it didn't make any difference at all. But in that particular moment, for that particular time and place, that insignificant thing, but I could have written a book on why, and my enthusiasm was so great. And by the way, it was true for that moment. So marketers have like a million of those things.
Yeah.
And when our business back then was just $1 million to 10 million, I would believe them and I would follow them and I lap all that stuff. But once you got to be over 100 million, and I had much bigger tests, this was before Agora, I found out that they didn't work. Well, most of these secrets just don't work. So you got to go. It's like Lewis, a friend of mine that was learning jujitsu with me. I always could beat him for like the first year or two, and then one day he was way better than me. Like the next day, and I'm like, what the hell happened? What have you been? And he goes, I realized that I used to think there were 400 techniques in jiu-jitsu, but I realized there were only 4. And I was like, I almost didn't know what he meant, but now I do. And that's a challenge that you're talking about, because as you get more masterful, you go into like this zone thing, and things do get reduced.
Yeah.
But they have a common theme. But you can't start off that way, and you can't teach that way. Because the student is, there's one of my favorite sayings is, when the student is ready, the master appears, the teacher appears. And so they're not ready for that at that point. They're not ready for like a Zen, a koan that, you sit there and so, yeah, so you have to do it. And I think there's nothing wrong with doing that, as long as what you're giving them, the techniques, work more often than they don't.
Yeah.
They're not bogus, and you don't notice them.
One of the things I do is I teach what I call the big 4 selling emotions, which are new, easy, safe, and big. And so I try not to teach technique.
Right.
I try to teach to the philosophy. This also gives me limitless. So like when you said something about having a voice, like comedians have a voice, good writers have voice, like you have a platform.
Right.
I have this emotional platform that I can expand on indefinitely. I can go forever, which does give me unlimited sort of like talking points.
Right.
But also it's a language, and the language needs to speak to these 4 emotions.
Right.
And so it's the most simple concept to grasp, but because it is philosophical, it's like very difficult to execute. Like there's so many layers of like belts to it.
Right.
Like, because most people start off the white belts, all right? The white belts start off saying, I got a new thing. It's easy to use.
Right.
It's safe and predictable,
Right.
and it's going to make a big difference in your life. And they say it just like that.
Right.
Until one day they're saying something like, this thing is 93% reliable. Okay, that's a little bit more, right? Or they will say, it was invented by a Harvard PhD. A little bit more nebulous, but a little bit more like, it's safe and credible.
Right.
And even down to the fact, like, this guy lives in the richest zip code in America. And it's like, that is so far, but it still says, I'm credible.
Right.
And that execution can be developed infinitely.
Yeah.
And like you can continually get better and better and better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I noticed that when I first saw your marketing. I like that. I was surprised, actually, because those are fairly well-known pillars, ideas. But the fact that you connected it to a language, I thought that was very cool. That gave it this deeper level, this philosophical level. I wanted to find out how those things participated in a language. And so, I think that, what are we saying? I think we're saying that if you want to sell anything that's self-improvement related or skill development related, you have to accept the fact that you have to teach individual skills. Otherwise you won't get the white belts into your gym.
Yeah.
And but if you can somehow turn that all into a unique system that is your either philosophical or practical conclusion from becoming an expert yourself, that really gives you that, like you said, that infinite source of new conversations and also just understanding things too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when they see it, so the language is occurring beneath the words. So what I do is I go on, like I have like a computer and I have like a smart pen, and I take a green for the new, easy, safe, and big emotions, and I look for those, and then I call them out. And so when you see the green, that's what's the actual language at play. That's where it is. It's hidden. It's underneath
Right,
those words.
right.
I could use infinity words to convey these things. And then I'm going to call out a couple like stupid questions. Whoops, I don't mean to say that. Beginner questions that I
Right.
often get. Like I read a sales letter and I didn't see New Easy, Safe, and Big. Well, one,
Right.
you probably missed it.
Right.
Two, not every letter is good.
Right.
That might just exist
Right.
and suck.
Right.
Like I'm when I'm looking at the very best ones, I can't stop. I
Right.
can't put the pen down. The green
Yeah.
pen just goes all the way through. So
No, I
it's
think it's true, and a lot of the best copywriters, the best writers, make all that stuff invisible. Of course, it's invisible because when you're being sold something, you know you're being sold something, and so your defense mechanisms are high, and super skilled people reduce that by not making it obvious. It's not that you can't; you can do it and make it obvious. But to do that, you're in this. Everything has to be bigger and louder, and then you get into misleading copy, and yeah. So that's where the skill comes in for sure.
You know something that I love, because I prepped for this when I started. I couldn't decide, do I want to read all your books again, or I decided to do something different. I just YouTubed your name. I searched your name on YouTube. I started watching your interviews, and you just did one with John Newton recently. I usually don't prep. I usually want this to be like a free-flowing conversation, but I was a little nervous for this one, so I prepped. One of the things that you said, it's cool because you said something earlier too, like we all end up at the same conclusions with different names.
Right.
You said something that I've been shouting while the markets get rocky and the financial industry is getting rocky. I've been saying there are wartime copywriters and peacetime copywriters.
Yeah.
We know this in stocks, wartime CEOs, peacetime CEOs, right? But in copy, now anybody can sell anybody when the market goes up 15% every day. Of course someone's going to
Right.
buy your
Right.
newsletter, right? Just tell me which
Yeah.
one's going up 20, 30%. I can't lose.
Right.
So there's wartime copywriters that need to shine now. And what I've been saying is, and I just thought about it recently in a different light, what I've been saying is you need to speak to their worldview and their beliefs more than just promising gains. And you've got to get them into that trust factor and get them bought in like that. And I said recently, I almost like, to say this for me is a statement. And I said, I think ClickBank writers are doing it better than us right now. The ClickBank writers, when I say ClickBank writers, that comes with a sleazy, slimy, like they make up stuff. It's like, it's way out there, but they're writing stories. They're
Right.
doing narrative-driven
Right.
sales letters.
Yeah.
And in our industry, my generation has never known this.
Right.
My generation came from a very mechanical, formulaic, objection, claim, proof, benefit, which I stand by, it works. But you need to know how to nuance and
Right.
finesse that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who have never had to learn how to do that, and all they know how to do is promise $10,000 in 24 hours.
When were you born?
88.
Like 88. Since 1980, we've been in a nonstop bull market with some setbacks. So you're 100% right. This is something that Bill talks about a lot. When you're in that kind of, as you say, when you're in that kind of market, you can sell profits, basically. That's what you're selling. But in this market, you have to sell something more, something deeper. And it's funny that you use that term, that metaphor, because I was using it too. Of course, we're talking about The Godfather, right? Peacetime consigliere, no,
Yeah.
we need wartime. And I've been saying that about publishers.
Huh, okay.
That's been my thing with it. We need wartime publishers now. Our peacetime publishers are too soft. I shouldn't be saying this. I don't really mean that about Agora. I mean that some other business. I mean, you know, they've been forever since they started, with a couple of exceptions, never experienced the market that we're in now, and so everything for them is like, you know, it's kind of simple and easy, and you know what to do, and you can be very nice, and you can keep everybody employed. But a wartime CEO just gets rid of everything but what's going to work, and so that's, yeah. So it's interesting you say that, but I think you're right, and it's a whole different skill set because you're selling. There's a couple of different ways to do it, but you're selling basically ideas. People are confused. Things are not working. The world is upside down, and they want an explanation. And so,
I think, I mean, one of the masters at this is Palmer.
Yeah.
If you've read some of his recent, like the Bill Bonner letter, America's Nightmare Winter just came out. Well, I guess it's kind of old now, but when you look at that, when you look at financial lockdown, when you look at Have You Heard of TAS, do you? I should ask this, like, how involved, like, you own 3,000 businesses and 100 bajillion properties, right? How do you still keep up with like what's going on in the trenches in our little space?
well, sorry. I do now that I went back into it. For a while everything was flying, and a couple of years ago I got back into it because we had a run-in with the FTC, and Bill and I took a look at the copy, and it was just ridiculous. And so we spent a year and a half doing that, and now, you have this big change in the market. So now I've been very, very much involved in it.
Okay.
I'm kind of trying to relearn it, and there are some differences for sure, but the fundamentals are just exactly the same. And you have to understand that if you're writing for the investment community, that people want an explanation. Somebody told me this. Where did I just get this? You maybe even know, but what you have to do is show them what the problem is, explain it, but you don't want to present yourself as the solution. This is not always true, but I thought this was interesting. Whatever this person was that made this point said, you have to be the guide. There's a solution, but you're the person that's going to help. And the hero has to be your customer. That's what it was. And you're his guide. You're pointing out what's wrong. He goes, oh yeah, but you're going to make him feel like he's going to turn out to be the hero. Do you know who this is from?
I feel like part of what you were doing reminded me of something Todd would say.
Yeah.
Which is, Todd would say something like, remove your product from the equation and explain everything about, like what's wrong, how he fixes it, but you can't say your product.
Right.
Just here's all the
Right.
things about
Right.
what's wrong and how to fix it.
Right.
Oh, by the way, I have that.
Yeah, that's good. So, anyway, we back in the day before 1980, when we were selling products, we were selling an explanation. This is why the world is bad, and the very fact that I'm explaining it to you in a way that corresponds with your core emotional beliefs makes you trust me, and then the rest is having a solution that seems feasible. You don't even have to. I mean, the nice thing about this kind of market is that you don't really have to make promises that you may or may not be able to keep. They want to stay with you and get more from you because they trust you instinctively, because you have the right emotions, the right philosophy of life, the right worldview.
I have to have a caveat here, because
Right.
this is important about the peacetime people.
Right.
One, that's slower. It's slower, but it's steadier. It's not explosive. And so the idea that they want to stay with you, it's going to be smaller volume, from my experience.
Absolutely.
It's going to be smaller volume, and
Yep.
they don't like it. They want to make
Right.
$2 million on the launch.
Right.
2 plus.
Right.
5, 15 million.
Yep.
And it's like, I've seen that easy come, easy go. The other thing is, there's 2 parts. One, it's lower volume, and 2, it's lower hit rate. So the more you go that way, the more likely you are to fail.
Yeah.
In that they have to, this is for the peacetime publishers.
Right.
You're not going to get $1 million off the bat, and you're going to have to try more ideas. Because whenever you're going for that instead of just pure $10,000 in an hour, it's more likely to fail.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to run with that cycle. And you've always taught LTV, and that's another thing that
Right.
I think has gone, like, they've forgotten about
Right,
as we
right.
get more into, like, the bull market and the options and the meme stocks.
Right.
Like, they've almost, like, they got to make all their ROI on the front end, and they don't think LTV and
Right,
retention
right,
and renewals.
Yeah, I think you're right, and actually, that's where our pain point is. We're trying to develop solutions to this. So, like, if you wanted us, sell me. You already got me sold, so you should come and help us get back our.
You're planting a seed.
Yeah.
Man, it'd be great to have you on our team. That's how you do it.
Well,
you
have a
sneaky
way.
dog.
I know that you have a perspective that's unique, and I realize now when you explain that caveat that, yeah, I would love to be able to not accept having a universe that was 70% smaller. I know how to make it through this period of time, but as I always remind my colleagues that agree that we should go back to what worked pre-1980, our universe was 30% the size it is now. So is there an area where you can still be successful but have you'll never have, unless the market environment changes, you're not going to have 2 or 3 million subscribers like we used to have, but certainly like to have a lot more than like a million, so anyway, just come on board and help us out, that'd be great.
I mean, all right, we'll talk off camera.
Later.
We'll talk off camera.
Right.
I mean, what a everyone in the world just got to see me get flirted with by Mark Ford.
Yeah.
That's a career highlight. Was Mark Ford? Mark Ford's interested in me working on his team. That's the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. So, pivoting out of that, one of the things that you did say that I want to kind of come back to is the idea of when you're proposing the solution, you don't want to propose your product as a solution. So sometimes on these podcasts, I do like to give technical knowledge because everyone watching us is basically a copywriter.
Right.
One of the things that I do is I have a label for the thing that you were describing, which I call the force of nature. And it's really especially true in the markets and financial copy, where what I want to do is you can't just say there's a problem and then explain the solution like you would in a lot of other avenues of copy, like health or survival or these other ones. Instead, I feel like what you have to do is you have to, I say, plant the seed of doubt or a crack in their worldview via some sort of key insight where the problem would go for other copy. Mm-hmm. And so what that is like you have to identify some erroneous action that they've been taking on accident. Mm-hmm. They didn't realize they were doing this. So one of my favorite examples of this is very straightforward. Agora and Nomi Prinz, my old copy chief, Evaldo and Alex, wrote this package called 25-cent Trader. And the problem was you weren't trading at 10 a.m. So right there, you have this insight like, oh, it's not my fault. I wasn't trading at 10 a.m. And the demonstrates like you traded these other times, it wouldn't work. Right. So it has to make you go, huh. I sort of never thought of that.
Right.
So the problem can't be like in other niches of copy. You could be a lot more. Here's the problem. It's killing you. It's ruining your life. It's destroying your liver. All that stuff. And this you have to plant some sort of seed of doubt. They're like, oh. And then you have to reveal like, well, what's actually happening is a force of nature. I call it a market force at play. And when copywriters do this, they don't. A copywriter is utilizing a force of nature effectively is because they'll actually use natural terms. They'll say tsunami of cash. They'll say earthquakes, ripple effects. They'll say it's like a hurricane. They'll actually use natural terms. So what you want to do is you want to prove that there's a force of nature in the markets. So I say, hey, man, it's not your fault. You've actually I don't want to use the 10 a.m. thing. You could use anything. Like you could say you're not trading on Tuesdays. Right. And it's like, well, wait, what do you mean I'm not trading on Tuesdays? Well, you didn't realize, but like I have the schedule for Wall Street, and on Tuesday that's when stuff goes down. Look, so every Tuesday, I prove that on Tuesday this is happening. It's benign. It's not malevolent. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is. This is what happens on Tuesdays, and I had to prove that on Tuesdays this force of nature is in play. And then you're gonna say, well, wait, okay, so I see that and I believe it. I see if I could. That there's something there. The reader has to feel like there's something there I never knew. How do I do it?
Right.
And then you say, well, I actually happen to be studying this for the last 25 years, and me and my team have developed XYZ, and here's my mechanism. And I said, well, how do I get hold of that? And I said, well, it's funny you should ask. I actually have a service where every week I share what the mechanism spits out.
Right.
So like the idea I'm trying to paint here, going back to what you were saying and just sort of expanding on it, we all have the same concept. I think my emphasis is less on the problem, except for the problem in the context of the force of nature. The force of nature is causing a problem that you didn't know of because you didn't know about the force of nature. Now here's a big caveat. The problem can never be ignorance. You can never tell the reader, it's not your fault because you didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say the problem is education. The problem has to be the erroneous action you took as a
Right.
result of your
Right.
ignorance. It has to be the action, the erroneous action, not the ignorance. And then you explain, like, well, here's how your ignorance has screwed you all up because this force of nature you didn't know about. Stephen Pressfield talks about the resistance in the war of art. He's identified a force of nature that you didn't know was screwing you up and making you do all this stupid
Yeah.
stuff. Then, once you have that, your mind is wide open to like a whole new world
Right.
and possibility.
Yeah.
And that's when the mechanism
Yeah. No,
slips
that's
in.
great. That's. I haven't thought about that, but I think it sounds very powerful. Yeah, I like that idea because it's the prospect, if it's done right, is just like right open to you. You're pretty much, as you say, they're like, okay.
So yeah, like the psychology game is, I think, what you want to do, which is ultimately you want to teach them how to think, and there's the tactical approach. Present a problem. Here's the mechanism problem, the mechanism solution. Like and like, sure, but you have to get them. You have to teach them how to think. And the first thing you have to do, why problem?
Right.
Why is there why do we have to tell them a problem? The point is, they are not ready to receive your information unless it confirms their worldview. So you have to plant the seed of doubt in their worldview. So otherwise, it's like just jimmying something open just enough that light can crack through. The way that I explain it, you might know what this is. I always use this example, but I don't even know what it's called. In Japan, when you drop a plate on the floor or something like that and it shatters, and you glue it back together with the gold glue, do you know what that is?
No.
It's called like kimchi or something. I don't know, someone can Google it. But the idea is like if you break a plate, then you can glue it all back together. It'll be more beautiful than when it originally was whole. That's what you're doing. You're cracking their worldview. Just you don't have to destroy it.
Right.
You don't have to be a world ender. Like, oh my God, my life is a lie.
Right.
But it has to be like this little
Right.
and then you can put your gold glue in the cracks, and that'll completely change the way their worldview looks.
Yeah.
And then you can that's the trust.
Mm-hmm.
You've opened their mind to that. Something that you said that I really loved. Now I want to tell like people how you might do that. You said Google's a bad avenue for finding these sorts of ideas. I don't want to steal it from you. Do you remember saying that and why?
No, I actually, I think my son, who's a copywriter now, he gave me that thought. The problem with everybody Googles, and so the problem with using Google as research is you're getting first of all you're getting indistinguishable information from true expertise and not. And the second problem is you're going, unless you're very assiduous, you're getting information that everybody can get and is already aware of. So it's not brilliant. What he did, and I thought it was great, is what we used to do back in the day, is he would read books by experts. He would go to the library, and if it was an issue of economics or whatever, and find in a book an idea. It could be a solution, whatever. It's kind of like what you were talking about. That gives you a much deeper understanding. And people say, "How do I find it?" You'll know it when you read it. You'll go, "Wow, that's good." And if you feel that way, then probably your readers will feel that way too. So, it's just. I mean, I use Google all the time, but I write my own personal blog, and sometimes I'm confronted with its shallowness because I get a note back. Well, actually, that's not true, Mark. For this reason, that. I'm like, oh boy.
I want to pivot to that too. Like you have that blog, but before I do, I want to kind of like summarize in like a tactical version for the people who want tactical advice. The thing that Mark said at this one, camera one, please, camera one.
Number one.
The thing that Mark said that I really liked was don't use Google because Google is an accumulation of the most popular answers at the top, and that's where everyone goes.
Right.
You said you have to go to like page 18 to find a new idea,
Right.
and then I was like, that's so smart.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you said is when people I get preachy. That's one of my problems when I'm working with my writers. I want my writers literally tell me settle down. Like Tuesday we have our call and I was like, this is what we need to do.
Right.
And I was like, do this. And my writer's like, bro, I'm gonna do it. Just chill out. And I was like, all right, fine. So I get preachy, but one of the things that you said that really hit me, and I was trying to say to him, and you summarized it, and I like vomited it for like an hour to him in a paragraph. But you said something like, you'll know the idea when you have that like, ooh, this is an idea and I want to share it.
Right.
What most people do, and this is what you said when I was podcasting, when I was prepping, was like what most people do though is they just say, hey, this idea worked, I'm gonna rip it off, I'm gonna knock it off.
Right. Right.
And they never have that internal guttural
Right.
like, ooh, I've
Right.
got to share
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
They say, oh, this type of promo is working, I'm gonna write this type of promo.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not. You're right. You're right. They're just imitating. You're on the outside. Everything's about getting on the inside. It's like you said, the stuff that's really working is invisible. So if you're just looking on the outside, actually literally plagiarizing, and it doesn't work, there's a reason why, because it's just that everybody's read it and they don't quite believe it anymore. Part of this idea is going to the true experts. Books are written by people that have spent 30 years, not fiction books, but nonfiction books. Spent 30 years studying a subject, and the only reason they can get a book published is because they've been always trying to get deeper and have been, if a book writer is the same thing as a copywriter. You're trying to get published and make money, so you have to be fresh with your ideas, and you have to be a little deeper and so a little more contrarian. So you're just much more likely to get those ideas when you go there. And I say you got to trust your instinct. If you read something that sounds new and fresh, it will be new and fresh to your readers. You just have to maintain that excitement about it and not get distracted and end up, putting other stuff in there that's not as. I always think that the best copy always has I used to call it like a golden anchor or something. I can't remember, but
The golden thread?
well, the golden thread connects it to the golden anchor. It's that inspiration that you have when you look on something and go, this is really what it's all about. Like your idea about, that flash of light, whatever, with that insight that you give to the reader. Like when you had that, you knew it was strong. And so the challenge then is not to lose it, is you have to keep the golden thread connected to it. So so that you can use it over and over again and develop it.
I've called that the soul of the promo.
Right.
Like
The soul, right. You got to keep the soul there. But you have to recognize as a copywriter that everything else you're doing is going to be against keeping the soul there. Because that's a momentary, part intellectual, part emotional complex that is easy to slip. It's easy to slip away.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the challenge. You just kind of keep going back to the original instinct and try to make sure that that soul is represented in your copy, and not just you're adding on extra ideas because they're kind of interesting. They're just pulling people away from it's true of anything. Fiction, it's true of movies,
Yeah. So in a very technical term, what we're describing is the theme. It's the central core one idea. In a more philosophical term, you call it golden anchor. I call it the soul. But it manifests in copy, and it manifests in a thing that I call the golden lasso. And the golden lasso, I got this idea from like Wonder Woman, like her little lasso of truth and justice or whatever. When I do a promo breakdown, the best ones. So, because someone will always say something like, "Well, I didn't see a golden lasso in this promo." It's because that one isn't written by the best. It's probably just some random guy on Upwork got hired to write a sales letter.
Right.
So the best ones I can find in the promo, the golden lasso, and I can draw with. I take a yellow one because I use green for the big four emotions, yellow, and I say, "Oh, this is the refrain that they've repeated on page." It gets hit like twice on page 1, and then once on page 2, once on page 3, and then once on page 5, and then once on page 7, and then once on page 11.
Yeah.
And it starts to get a little bit more sparsed out,
Right.
but it's the same idea, and usually within it is the force of nature, the promise, which is a result, the actual result that's anticipated, and and a hint of a mechanism to start. There's usually no mechanism to start because you don't want to show your hand. You're telling them a story and a force of nature. The mechanism usually comes later. It's like, here's how you tap into all that. And that's how it manifests in copy. And I was working with a guy this week, and I said, dude, the reason your letter is so scattered is because you don't know what your golden lasso is. You don't even know what your force, you don't know what you're writing about. You don't know why I'm here. And I'll tell you when you know you have it and your letter is true is I can take that golden lasso, the circle of, I'll use the crypto script because of the Altitude crypto script that broke the internet, like whenever it went haywire with that. That was, he said, there's a script that always plays out. 1, 2, 3, and it can make you rich.
Right.
And I circled that every time he said it in yellow. And it was just like I explained. It happened like twice on page 1, once on page 2, once on page 3, once on page 4, then page 6, and then it started to spread out.
Right.
I was like, this is what the thing's about. In order for your letter and message to be true, you have to be able, I need to be able to copy and paste this anywhere.
Right.
At random.
Yeah, that's good.
And it makes sense to be there. It always makes sense to be like, and by the way, this is about a script that always plays out like clockwork. 1, 2, 3, and makes people rich. It needs to always be pasteable.
Yeah, it's you can relate that to the power of one, that you have to decide. Yes, you can write a mediocre promotion that's what I call a tossed salad, especially in other areas like health and so on. But if you for the serious stuff where you generate the big commissions like investing, you have to have and it's a gamble. You may be wrong, but you got to stick with it, because if you don't commit to it, then it just loses its power. So I agree with you. It's interesting you say twice on page 1, and that's how I have something similar to that. When I'm talking about, I guess it's similar. You're telling it proof. You tell it when you're proving something by stories or anecdotes. I always say the first story should be 300 to 500 words. The second story should be half that many. The third should be half that many, and then as you go on, you don't need to do it as often, but it's somehow related to. All you have to do is say, you can tell a lie, but at the 7th time people will believe it if they, it's going to go. That's not a good analogy, because you don't want to be telling a lie. But there's something about, it's like you say, you're kind of training them how to think. You give them a concept that feels right, and they may not totally understand it. And then as they go through the package, they start to understand it better, and it feels truer and truer. And
What I call that, so I have a label for this. I think as a coach and mentor, you develop shorthand, labels, so that I can quickly say it in 2 words. So I call it setting context. So the first thing you need to do is set the context, and you usually do that with a deep, involved story that really illustrates the core idea that you're trying to convey. Then you get to a point called pile-on. And this brings me back to Mike Palmer and the letters that he writes. Like in Financial Lockdown, I remember the story about Germany in the 1920s and the hyperinflation that they experienced, because that was his core context setter. And then, once the context is established and you understand the idea, he can say some wild shit, and it's proof. He said Michael Jordan paid $100,000 for a tree. In isolation, that's just a rich guy being crazy with his money. He said someone paid $1 million for a pair of Yeezys shoes. In isolation, that's ridiculous.
But in context.
But because he said something about Germany 1920s and said, like, one of the things that happened was alternative currencies. And so he said something like an NFT just went for $3 million or something like that. And he's like, do you see? It's the same thing. And it's like, because he had so firmly rooted the context in your psyche, everything he said afterward became proof. And that is so powerful. He taught you how to think. Now, Michael Jordan paying, they call it alternative investments. The Yeezys, he said those are an alternative investment now. They fit the bill. So, like, one of the jokes I made on the call, like I was recording this like breakdown, I was like, you could say the penguin population in Antarctica's exploded. It's certain doom for the American dollar. Like, what the like, some of these things aren't related at all.
And it works because it reflects how we think, our natural pattern of thinking. is you start seeing patterns that aren't necessarily correct or logical, but because you're, that's how the mind works. I mean, I've been playing this stupid game where they show you two pictures and you start identifying
Okay.
what's similar and what's not, and they're mostly people, and so I think now in terms of like connections, joint connections, it's just because playing this game, but I'm starting to interpret my business decisions that way, and I'm thinking vaguely about, you know, business or social situations, and I can see myself like, oh, this is kind of like the difference between the ankle and the joint, and one is different, you know, it's like.
What
But
does
it feels-
that?
it
What
feels
does that look like in
correct.
practice? That's
Yeah.
very difficult for me to relate to. What does that look like in real life?
It's weird because it's so, I almost have to pull myself out of it. Let me think, like I'm having a conversation with my wife, and she's saying something that I don't think is quite right. And then I go, that's like if you know, an image of a woman, one of her shoes is a different color.
Mm.
And so I can circle that. That's the different deal. And so I'm thinking, yeah, you know, but what am I going to say? I think that's like you're just proving that you're wearing a different shoe. I mean,
You're saying like one of these things is not like the other. Like, wait a minute, that does not fit, does not belong, doesn't
Right.
correlate.
right. And but the main point I'm making is that patterns are the way our mind works.
Oh yeah.
The only way we can solve problems non-linearly, which is how we solve most of our problems, is by noticing patterns. And so what you're describing, what they're doing, that's a way of creating patterns. So at some point, like you said, even if the pattern itself doesn't actually make any sense, it reinforces the person's belief in it because they see some kind of similarity to it.
Oh
We have a
man.
question for Mark from Dean Davis here, and it's, is attention and thought something that is hijacked?
Is attention and thought something that is hijacked? Is this guy studying Wittgenstein? Because this seems very out of my league. Attention and thought, I don't understand the question.
I would say yes. Like, I would just say straight up, like, that's a yes/no question, and my answer is yes.
What is, explain the question. I don't even
The
get
question is attention and thought something that is hijacked? Like, can I hijack your attention and your thoughts? Yes, I definitely can.
No.
So can Mark. Like, maybe you don't know if you're doing it or not,
Right.
but like, that's what you do when you have a pattern interrupt. I've hijacked your attention.
Okay.
When I what I do called trigger BS,
Mm-hmm.
and I say something that makes you scrutinize me, I have definitely hijacked your attention.
All right. I don't think of it in those terms, but certainly you do want to capture attention. I guess that's the terms that we used to use. But I have a feeling there's some other question in it, because that would be too obvious an answer, right? Well, if
Yeah,
he
I felt
wants
like that
to-
was a really easy one.
Yeah,
Question
maybe
for,
he feels bad for us that we're not capable of answering the questions.
He says, Mark, how do you think we control our own thoughts? Quote, free will. I think we are highly susceptible. Okay. So he's asking, is your free will open to manipulation? Is your free will open to being influenced?
Of course, yeah.
That's how propaganda works, right?
Yeah, but that's how, look, it's how the mind works. It's a DNA thing. The world is extremely complicated, you know, on basic, you know, physics point of view. And we can't possibly make decisions logically. Even whether I should stop here at the deli or get some coffee, 99% of the decisions we make, and selling is about getting people to make decisions, are irrational, and they depend on our reptilian and our limbic brain. And the reptilian brain is instinct, the limbic brain is emotion. So what we're involved in is the language, as you put it, the language of using the reptilian, and the reptilian is how you catch the attention,
Right.
and the limbic is how you get them behind you emotionally, and then the neocortical brain is only used after you've sold them emotionally, and that is, and why do you use that? They've already made the decision, They just want to be able to convince themselves that it's a logical decision.
Right.
And that's the easy part of the promotion.
I've got like 17 anecdotes for that. There's that one. So I'm writing these down because whenever I have multiple answers to something and threads going off in my mind, I'll forget what my 4 were. Okay. Oh my God, I have more. All right, here, let me just go over a couple. And I'm getting more practical, like more real life. So you said something about patterns earlier, okay? Patterns is one of the reasons why I think I've been a slow learner at a lot of things, and I've failed at a lot of things, especially, I would say, in my interpersonal dynamics. Because oftentimes, you don't think to analyze things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think to look for patterns. And that's something that I've been... That's a presence thing. So if you're a person in your head, you never see them. You have to start putting presence and understanding and paying attention to these things. This is really deep rooted in stuff like when we were talking about going to the bar and talking to girls and stuff like that. Like this has been a big time thing. I recognize it in copy, and then I started saying, oh wait, there's patterns in human behavior and everything like that. Like, and copy is present. That little subtext dance is present in human interaction at a insane degree.
Mm-hmm.
So, first thing, Antonio Damasio proved that all decisions are emotional. Basically, whenever you hurt the emotional part of your brain, you can't decide how I'm going to organize my files on my desk. You can't make any decision.
Right.
These are decisions.
Right.
The second thing is talking about the reptilian brain. There are words that speak to the reptilian brain directly. That's the language that I'm trying to teach people. New, easy, safe, and big. Make your feelings go, ooh, I like that. Like little green lights. Like, I like that. I
Right,
like that.
right.
I like that. Someone asked me, I'm going to turn this into, we should turn this into a lead for my book. I think this is a lead I want to use for my book. I'm going to make it the very first line, the pattern interrupt. I'm going to say, are boobs good? Do you like boobs? I think that's what I'll say. Do you like boobs, Bob, or something like that. I shouldn't say Bob and boobs because the words are too close, similar. Anyway, I had a guy in my inner circle program say, well, can we really just keep telling them it's new, easy, safe, and big? Won't they get tired of that? And I said, tell me something, Jeff. Do you like boobs? And Jeff goes, well, yeah. I said, you're a straight man? He said, I'm married. All right, how old are you? 57. You're 57? Yes. You like boobs? Yes. Do you still like boobs? He said, yes. I said, if I showed you a pair of boobs right now, would you look? He said, yeah, of course I would. I said, right. Because boobs resonate with your reptilian brain.
Right.
And they always do and always will. And so will new, easy, safe, and big. Because we're not talking to your logical brain. It won't get tired of it. It can't
Right.
ever get tired of it. It
Right.
gobbles it up. Blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 you know?
Yeah.
So that's the part of your brain that's always at play. And it predates being able to do math or logic or reason or language.
Right.
It's been there. It's the reptilian brain. That's
Right.
the thing that I want people to understand. Is we're subverting that. We're going past all that logical stuff. We're going straight to that. And there are words that hit it. And you have to understand those words are categorized as some sort of expression of new, easy, safe, or big. And that's how you speak to that. The last thing I want to talk about is thoughts being hijacked. I want to ask you about this too, because, you know, we've talked about like yoga. In the past, you do yoga. You've done jujitsu. I want to ask you about like sort of your spirituality. But before I get into it, emotions, thoughts, and he asked if your attention could be hijacked. There's something I really noticed is that thoughts and actions, the words on the page, that happens in real life. And I noticed this with, I would say especially with my romantic partners, women, is they will start acting strange to me. Erratic, I would say. Like, I don't understand where this is, like, we're having a fight, and I think I solved the fight, and then next thing I know, we're fighting about something else. I'm like, where did that even come from? And then I'm like, okay, we'll solve that fight.
Right.
And then there's another fight. And I was like, this doesn't ever end. Like, what's going on? She must be in a mood or something. Like, what's going on? And I have to liken this to a video game. I gamify life a lot like this. There's a video game called Gears of War. And in the game, there's this thing called an emergence hole. It's a big hole that comes out of the ground. and then the bad guys, the locusts, they come out of the ground, and you got to shoot them. You shoot all the locusts, you shoot all the bad guys, but they never stop coming until you throw a grenade in that hole and plug it up. That's an emergence hole, an E-hole. E-hole could also be an emotional hole. This is way off copy, but sort of just on the psychology of it, because this is where it all comes from. What I started to notice when I'm having these arguments is the arguments aren't real. The thing we're fighting about doesn't exist. It's like she is going to be mad right now, and she's looking for reasons, things to attach that anger to. And what I figured out, and she sort of taught me this, she's like, this is what I was talking about, I'm not good at giving compliments. And she basically at some point was eventually like, I need you just to validate my feelings.
Right.
Like you keep telling me, like, I say things like, well, that's a you problem. Like, I didn't make you feel this way. You conjured up that emotion yourself. Like, I didn't say what you interpreted that I said. I didn't say that. You assumed that I was meaning that, but I didn't mean that. But I never said, I understand why you feel that way.
Right.
That's the grenade that plugs the E-hole.
Yeah.
I'm telling you this for all the dudes watching, for anyone in a relationship. The grenade that plugs the E-hole is, I know what I said made you feel this way, and I understand why you feel that way.
There's a great YouTube little skit on that. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's hilarious. You might want to post it for your readers. I'll give it away a little bit, but it's still so much fun to see. So you're behind a couch, and it's a guy and a woman, and he's kind of facing her, and she's going, I just can't explain it. It's like this pain. It's this searing pain. It's like this, and he goes, well, maybe don't tell me what it is. You're always doing that. And she gets madder and madder, and finally he goes, okay, honey, I understand. You have a pain, and I just want you to know I understand that you're having a pain, And she goes, thank you, honey. And then she turns, and this first time you see her head, and of course there's a giant nail stuck through her head that pokes the guy's eye in.
Dude, and the thing is, when I finally got to that point, like we had 17 different arguments, and I'm like, I don't know why we're fighting. This wasn't a problem an hour ago or yesterday. When I finally did that, and it was like being next to like a sociopath. Yeah. It was like next to being like schizophrenic. Like, like as soon as I said the words, like all this anger and frustration in her face vanished. She's like, thanks. And then she like skipped away, and she was like, everything's okay now. And I was like, we fought for 4 hours. And like I had to just do that.
I solved 18 problems.
Yeah, it was never about. That's the thing. Like, okay, that's how the world works. The whole world is the E-hole. The whole world is. The words on the page don't matter. They're an attachment to a feeling. Mm-hmm. The thoughts aren't real. Your thought is a result of some sort of like internal bubbling sensation, or what we would call an emotion. And then your brain starts looking for things to justify it. And that is in sales. Your bubbling emotion is, I want to buy this. And then your brain seeks out information to confirm and attach and say, I should buy this. So when she was angry and she didn't know why, she kept finding problems, things that I do, or things that are wrong, and saying, that's why I'm angry, that's why I'm angry, that's why I'm angry. But it wasn't. The anger was the anger. And the anger needed to be like, had a cool glass of water poured over it or something like that. And so I started to recognize that's what's happening in sales. It doesn't matter what I say. And this is what I have a thing, another label for you. I tell my writers, go full Chad. Do you know what a Chad is?
No.
So a Chad is, in this day and age, it's the description for a douchebag at the bar. The loud guy at the bar. And the guy who, for whatever reason, he's a jerk, he's rambunctious, he bumps into people, spills drinks, he's loud, he curses, but he always goes home with women, right? It's because as a copywriter, you're in your head. You're not in the field. You're always operating up here. And you never think like a Chad.
Yeah.
And a Chad is that dude that stirs up all this ire and emotion and attention. He makes them feel the thought that I said earlier in the podcast, who do you think you are? And then, once they feel that, they seek out reasons to attach the answer, whether they're real or not. They do it, like dudes, we talk about picking up girls, those books. Dudes think you're supposed to do these things and then that happens. No. You create the fire, and then they seek out reasons to attach And that's what the guys think the lines are, the things that you did. They're made up. They're make believe. They're false.
Right.
One other analogy I use for folks is success. You don't do success. Success is a red hotel. So in a Monopoly, you buy 4 green houses and you could trade them in for a red hotel. You don't buy a red hotel. You buy 4 green houses. But the final result is a red hotel, which
Right.
is like a passive thing that happens like as a result of.
Right. That's
And
good.
and so that's the way emotions and thoughts are correlated. There's an emotion that you poke, and then they actively try to make sense of it, because an emotion is a physiological vibration. Like when you're angry, it's up in your shoulders. When you're sad, it's in your belly. When you're anxious, it's in your throat. It's a physiological sensation. And then you start hunting. Your brain's like, I need to understand this. And it
Yeah.
starts attributing where that sensation came from. That's where it doesn't matter what you say, because it's made up anyway. It's bullshit. I can hear I'm like yelling right now. I need to like, that's my philosophical like preaching right there.
That's good. It's a very good insight. I think it's very true.
So I
think
wonder
we got
in a moment here,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
How much time do we have left?
like 5 minutes.
Well, okay. Well,
'Cause we
probably
gotta
can't.
set up the food before 7.
All right, we can't dive into anything too deep. I wanted to ask you a little bit about if you could do it in like 90 seconds, because we've talked about you've done jujitsu, you've done like yoga and stuff like that. Where do you feel, and in terms of like all that stuff, like I just vomited out
Right.
presence, awareness. I don't know if I like to use the word spiritual because it comes like attached to all this stuff. Like where does your philosophy on like that stuff fall?
Well, I mean, I accept there's a lot of commonly said things about leading a worthwhile life that I think are true. And, most of the stuff on the Zen side I think is true. I'm not I'm a materialist. I don't think in terms of spirituality, but that doesn't mean that you don't end up with the same conclusion. I think it's just life is a struggle, like we said. There's a lot of pain in it, and it's better to try to know yourself, as Plato said, and just to be accepting of your. I've had some good breakthroughs. One when I stopped beating myself up. You may have that problem too.
Mhm.
That sounds like you might. I just learned. It's happened recently. I was in my 60s. I just decided to forgive myself. I realized that for my imperfections, I realized that when you forgive yourself, the world forgives you much more easily than when you don't. And a perfect example is Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, think about this guy did the unforgivable. He was governor of California, which he came from nothing. I started reading about him when I'm about his age. And he was the Austrian oak, this big kid from Austria. And I remember back then he said, my goal is to be the greatest bodybuilder in the world, then I'm going to be the #1 movie star of the world, and then I'm going to be president of the United States. He could barely speak English. And he did almost all of that. But then he got caught impregnating this maid, and yet everybody still loves him.
Yeah.
And his secret is that he just forgave himself. And it's kind of like we were talking about before about the Reiner interview, is that he just accepted his frailty and his, he didn't have too high an opinion of himself. And I think that's something that I work on, I think it just makes your life easier.
That,
I have friends I have a friend that does that in business. He's in the furniture business, and he knocks people off. He goes to furniture shows, and he knocks people off, and he buys their product. He knocks their product off, makes it. He's been doing it for 20 years. Makes it in China, and is selling it next to them. They're like vintage products. His are like knockoffs that you would buy on the street in the city, and he's selling it for a fifth the price.
Yeah.
And so they at first are furious with him, but he's so unable to take on guilt that they all end up loving him, and they just, okay, you know, Bernard is gonna knock us off, and so we'll live with that, you know.
Right. I love it's almost like part of that authenticity is like self-acceptance. Like,
Yeah.
I won't be guilty for this. I won't feel shamed.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember, and we'll wrap up. I remember I was on a date with a girl once, and I made a joke, and she tried to do like I made a joke that was like edgy about us
Right.
being intimate, and she tried to make like a little cutting like
Right.
well, aren't you like very eager or something?
Right.
And I remember her doing that, and I was like, you ain't gonna shame me for that. I'm not hiding it.
Right.
And that made it very good.
Yes.
Like when
Yes.
she said that,
Yeah.
like, oh, well, aren't
Totally.
you such and such? And I was like, I'm not. You can't shame me. Like I'm not even gonna hide it from you.
I would tell a story from when I was younger, but yeah, I totally understand that, and that's the way to go. I mean, people wanna. It relaxes everybody. You know, we're all frail.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate you doing this. This is kind of like a career highlight of mine, a dream come true. It's nothing to do with, I'm not writing a sales letter here. I'm not like making any millions of dollars with this. But just that, I mean, you are the culmination. So like, if you think about, why, people get into this and they want to be somebody, you went through all of it. You were a copywriter, you run businesses, then all of a sudden you're real estate and many businesses, and businesses like building all these teams and all of this empire and legacy, and just having one of the things I wish I had more time to ask you about is how do you do it with like 25 business interests, and like I said, like building teams, like something else I'm so naive, I have no clue about. I wish I could have, but I mean, you are what everybody hopes and aspires to one day. You're the Super Bowl, right? Where there's 32 teams or whatever, and they all have the same goal, but only certain people can get there. So just that I could sit here.
That's very complimentary, and you could do something for me if you could just take that quote and just email it to my children and my wife. That would be great.
Well, all right, yeah. So I mean, I'll stop. I mean, flattery. I'm doing it. I'm blowing smoke.
And as you can
but-
see, it works.
Yeah.
No, it was a pleasure. It was fun. I feel like I was on the Joe Rogan show of our industry, and it was a great conversation. I'm happy to keep talking anytime you want.
Thank you so much. Okay, cool. So for everyone who tuned in, someone said, "Will this be live, available to watch later?" Yeah, absolutely. This is just gonna be on YouTube on the channel. The replay will probably process over the next hour or two, and then it'll be up for everyone to rewatch. I really appreciate everyone who tuned in, folks who asked questions. I hope you guys got something out of this. This is Kyle Milligan. I was here with Mark Morgan Ford, the man, the myth, the legend. Career highlight for me. I thank everybody who came and participated and watched. Check this out. So until next time, peace out. Copy Squad.
Okay, great.
All right.
Yeah, I can see how it